I can't believe I'm doing this. Oh no. This is oh boy. I'm gonna let you know now there's like a 20-second delay, so anything funny that happens I'll be able to go back and check out on the YouTube side. Welcome everybody. I didn't know what else to call this, so we put it in the IRL segment. I don't really know where to start with this. I'm gonna be real. You're probably gonna see me become more beet red than I normally am. And yeah, I mean, Andrew's kind of right. It's like a clickbait sports kind of punishment. For all context on this, I had challenged the viewers on the NASCAR Weekly podcast last year, saying, if I got to think it was like a $300 super chat, I'd read a NASCAR romance novel on YouTube. And I learned very quickly that you do not challenge the internet, and here we are. I apologize it took so long. I needed to find a time where I would be completely free for a couple days in case I needed, change stuff up. And the bye week proved to be that. So we are going to read a book called Speed Dating by Nancy Warren. I could not find any of the books by Liz Allison. They were not available with what I use. And I'm going to try and go into this with an open mind and not laugh too much. I have never read a romance novel in my life. Honestly, I don't read too much anymore anyway. My mom would probably be upset with me about that. But here we are. Now I can't. I don't want to share screen because I have some of my financial information, like my card info and stuff on here. But I'll let you know now that the cover of the book has some random dude in a blank fire suit with a white hat, smiling out of a car. And Carl Edwards is in his car is in the background, the old 99 Office Depot Gen 4 car. And let me look closely. Oh my god, there's a Carl Edwards cameo in it. Oh my god, I didn't even realize that. There's a Carl Edwards cameo in this book. And wow. So let's get into it. I'll let you know now there are... How many chapters are in this book? How many? Where's that? Good Lord. Oh my god, there's 22 chapters in this book. It's 194 pages. And I'll be honest, I'm stalling. I do not want to do this. Oh, there's my mom in the chat. I'm not mad. No, not mad. You just owe me a lot of tuition back. Personally, I'm gonna love this. I'm sure you will, Mom. I'm sure you will. Oh my god. Okay, so what we're gonna do? Here's what we're gonna lay it out here. We're gonna read each chapter, and then I will not be able to look at the chat going on unless it's on my phone. I should probably just put it up there anyway. And what we'll do is at the end of each chapter, I'll read any super chats, membership, text, any of that. And then we'll go from there. Be sure to click the like button if you're new here. This is not what we normally do, but you know what? We're going to have fun with it. I'm going to pull up the chat on my phone at least. So I'll at least be able to see what you guys think about it. So... but reading the about page on Amazon, it says, Dylan Hargreave thinks I'm an actress paid to pose as his girlfriend. Oh my god, they didn't spell girlfriend right. At a North Carolina society wedding. How did this happen to me of all people? Kendall Clark, award-winning actuary and... Jesus Christ, I'm not going to know half of these words. And star of a number of different things. Just hours ago learned his irresponsible ex-fiance called off our wedding because she got pregnant, or got one of my colleagues pregnant, What are the odds? Don't tell me you haven't heard of Dylan Hargreave, Celebrity NASCAR and People's Magazine's sexiest man of the year. Those eyes, that smile. Darian's going to be here in a bit, and I'm going to have him read a chapter. Oh, my God. This is going to be great. Oh, my God. Oh, okay. And then in it says, this book is dedicated to Marcia Zinberg, an amazing editor and a delight to work with. Thank you. And big thank you to my favorite NASCAR driver, Carl Edwards, for being a wonderful character and good sport in every sense of the word. Carl, if you're watching this, I don't know. All right. Yeah, this is this is something. I'm gonna get taken out of context so much in this. All right. Get to it. I'm just making sure everything's good. Here we go. So it says, Chapter 1, Kendall Clark was looking for the most exciting night of her life. Only 31 years old, she would be the youngest recipient of a prestigious Sharpened Pencil Award for being chosen Actuary of the Year. For the 100th time, she tracked across the carpet of her hotel room in Charlotte, North Carolina, to practice the acceptance speech she'd give at the closing banquet of the Actuary Association dinner. She wanted to come across as humbled to be receiving this great honor, but also proud of the work that she did for her company. Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends, she paused. By the way, this is 194 pages, and I'm on page 8. It starts at page 8. She paused as she'd been taught in public speaking refresher courses she'd taken the second she learned she'd be making the speech. Breathe, she reminded herself. Look out at the audience. Smile. That's actually a thing, by the way. Trust is the cornerstone of our business, she informed the blue upholstered chairman in the corner of the room. Chair in the corner of the room. See, I apologize. I'm going to read like crap. She put an emphasis on trust. Such a nice, strong word to start a speech with. Trust. There was an hour or so before she needed to head down to the ballrooms A and B, where the American Association of Actuaries was holding its annual conference and awards banquet. She sent her dress down for pressing earlier in the day, wanting everything to be perfect. She bit her lip. The dress ought to be back. Willing to leave nothing to chance, she called down housekeeping. After many a long, lonely ring of the phone, a hesitant female voice said, "Hola." Okay. It didn't take Kendall long to realize that the woman spoke almost no English, and Kendall's Spanish wasn't any better. She thought after a few minutes of labored conversation that she'd gotten her request through. She wanted to hurry up with the dress and send it to her room. She'd barely replaced the receiver in its cradle when it rang. Kendall Clark, she said, in the most formal, because you never know of a business conference who might be calling you. But as she hoped, the voice was at the other end belonged to Marvin Fulford, her colleague and fiance. We already know what's going to happen there. Kendall, it's me, Marvin. He said with his so sweet voice. They never shared a room when traveling because both agreed it gave the wrong impression. That he was given some impressions. Indeed, this time Marvin had gone so far as to book a room on a different floor. Wow. Hi, Marvin. Are you going to pick me up here so we can arrive at the banquet together? That was one of the perks of working with your fiance, she long thought. She rarely had to attend big business events alone. I was hoping to come down now and talk to you for a few minutes. He sounded odd, as if nervous. Probably on her behalf. Great. I can practice my speech on a real person. Come up. Or maybe, she thought. As she replaced the phone, he wanted to... Oh, no. Maybe he wanted to make love before the ceremony. Her pulse quickened, as mine has just done. What a wonderful way to relax before her big moment. Her sex life had been sparse and non-existent lately. Not a good sign. I added that part. So the idea of him wanting to jump her bones right before the banquet filled her with delight. She'd planned to surprise him with some sexy new lingerie she bought. Oh, what have I gotten myself into? Oh, man. Well, sexy for her. Her makeup, hair, and nails were done courtesy of the hotel salon, so it took no time to slip into the black denim bra and high-cut panties and black silk slips she bought at Victoria's Secret. Her black stockings were sheer as a whisper, and her black sandals were strappy. She debated stilettos, but you didn't work in the actuary business without learning a lot of very useful facts, like the stats on back pain and injury stemming from wearing high-heeled shoes. Yes, 194 page of this. Oh my god. Carnation, so her sex life is Denny Hamlin's championship success. Damn. She was tingling with anticipation when a knock sounded at her door. Of course, they wouldn't have a lot of time, but with Marvin, not a lot of time was necessary. God damn! Jeez! Oh well, once they were married and things settled down, they could spend more time on that part of their relationship. She struck a sultry pose and then felt ridiculous, like I am right now. So she simply reminded herself to stand up straight, then open the door. Marvin stood on the other end wearing khakis. And I'll get to that super chat at the end of the chapter. Wearing khakis and a golf shirt. The fact that he wasn't dressed yet for the banquet made her very glad she slipped into her sexy underwear. But Marvin didn't even seem to notice. He glanced up and down the hall before he entered the room, looking not remotely like a man bent on a quickie. I'm not reading all these words. Marvin, is everything all right? She wondered if he was a little jealous that she'd received this honor instead of him. Surely he could be happy for her, as she'd have been for him. They were planning to spend their lives together. Wasn't marriage all about mutual respect, compatibility, and support? I have something to tell you, Kendall, that may shock you, he said, glancing up my way. Pale blonde hair, shorter than usual, she noted. He must have got a trim. He'd never been confused with Brad Pitt, but he was a pleasant-looking man, she thought. God, she really doesn't respect him. Of course, he probably didn't deserve it after this. Maybe a little on the pale side, but he did suffer from asthma. What the hell? I'm pale and suffer from asthma. I swear to God, I'm not cheating on my girlfriend. She smiled at him. Is it good news? This was the kind of conference where networking was abundant. Had he been offered a job? Good news. He glanced at her again as though surprised by the question. Then, as was typical for him, he took a moment to ponder. Marvin always looked at the sides of a question, at all sides of a question. It was a quality she admired in him. In some ways, it's good news, very good news, but you may not think so. Is it a job offer, isn't it? Is it very far away from Portland? The possibility had always existed that one of them would have got a better offer elsewhere. They'd never discussed what they'd do in that eventuality. Did she have to be tested now? Couldn't Marvin have waited till after the banquet? No, it's not a job offer. He blew out a breath. It's personal, and I don't know how to begin. The first icy claws of apprehension scratched the surface of her happiness. Personal. I never meant to hurt you, Kendall. I swear the whole thing was unplanned. The whole thing? She asked, feeling numbness start to creep in. Marvin's pale cheeks took on a faint pink hue, and he looked everywhere. He'd never seen him like this. He said, I've fallen in love with someone else. She blinked, opened her mouth, and then closed it again. When she didn't speak, he went on, I never meant for it to happen, to hurt you behind your back. I don't know what I was thinking. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't know how. And then she says, you're in love with someone else? And he goes, yeah. I'm adding my flair to this now. But we've interviewed caterers, picked out China. We're on the third draft of our guest list. He was rubbing a spot on the carpet with his toe, his brown shoe. I'm not reading all of this. Giving the nub of his shoe a worsen of worse. I don't know half these words, man. His full attention. After she petered out, there was a moment of painful silence. Who is it? This person you've fallen in love with. Her voice calm, for which she'd always been grateful. Penelope Varzan. He made eye contact and then his gaze slid away. Kendall stared at him. Our colleague, you've been seeing a woman we both work with behind my back. Probably why I got a hotel on the different floor. It was an accident, I swear. We were both working late one night, and one thing led to another. I didn't know how to tell you I'm sorry. Why are you telling me this now? She raised her hand to her head. I can't even think. I'm supposed to give a speech, and all I'll be able to concentrate on is that my date for the evening is love with another woman. Well, that's why I wanted to tell you now. You see, he sighed heavily and sat down to the wing chair beside the small table where she'd set up her laptop. Penelope's going to have a child. She's pregnant. Kendall's voice was barely a whisper. Yes. And this must have been going on for months. He says about 4 months. Damn. Oh, Marvin, how could you betray me like this? I wanted to wait till after the conference to tell you. You must have felt that things haven't been close between us for some time, she snorted. Now I know why. I like and respect you, Kendall. You have a fine mind and you're an excellent actuary. I mistook professional respect for warmer feelings. What are you saying? All her life she'd searched for the one person who would love her forever, a man like her father who had been faithful and true to his family. She wasn't looking for fireworks, multimillionaire hot shots, or any of that. All she'd ever wanted was a steady, decent man who'd love her and any family they might have had. Well, not now. She'd aimed so low and she still failed. Life be like that sometimes. Somehow she needed to understand why. You're a wonderful person, but you're not. Well, Penelope's exciting, passionate. I realize that's what's missing with us. Her laden stomach grew heavier. So I'm not exciting enough for you? Not your fault, Kendall. I need more. Well, I guess you're getting it. About 18 years of child support more. I can't believe this. As you may know, when women are in a delicate situation, they become emotional. Wow. He said that, not her. Thank you for this lesson, Marvin. The thing is, Penelope's feeling very insecure, and it's making her a bit clingy. What is your point? She said. She wants me to sit with her at the banquet tonight. That's why I had to tell you right away. I would, of course, have said no, but I want to support you. This is a big night for you and our firm, but she's carrying my kid. He paused for a moment, and she could tell he was savoring the phrase. His narrow chest swelled a little. I have to think of my family. Oh, so you're dumping me? Just like that, right before the biggest night of my life. He smiled at her, obviously relieved to have the burden of his confession off his chest, and have no hysterics wade through. You're strong, Kendall. You don't need me the way Penelope does. Penelope needed him in a few other ways. He walked to the door and opened it, then glanced back. Good luck tonight. He sounded as though he really meant it, though. After the door shut behind her ex-fiancé, Kendall stood there feeling frozen and numb. Bits of thoughts and phrases were jumbled in her head. Not exciting enough, pregnant, I need more. And through it all flickered the humiliating knowledge that this relationship had gone on for months under her nose, and she'd never noticed. She had the sick feeling that she was the only one in the office who hadn't. This was supposed to be a night of the greatest triumph in her life, not her greatest humiliation. If only she could think more clearly. She stood there in her new underwear and slowly tugged the engagement ring off her finger. and regarded the diamond solitaire like her dreams. It was modest. She ought to return it to Marvin, but he was just thrifty enough that he might offer the ring to Penelope. She put the ring on the dresser where it made a tiny click. She'd leave it as a tip for the maid. Having decided the ring's future to her satisfaction, she had glanced at the clock and discovered with horror that the banquet was starting in 15 minutes. Luckily, she was ready. No, wait, she wasn't. Something was missing. She looked around. Of course, it was her dress, the one Marvin helped her pick out. Did I skip a chapter? Hold on a second. It's doing what YouTube does and skipping ahead. All right. Dylan Hargreave gave a rebel yell into his headset, knowing he'd half deafen his spotter and any crew who were listening. She's sweet, he yelled, feeling the grab of the tires, the tightness of the tail, which, wow, that's a way to describe a car. He accelerated into turn 3 at Charlotte Motor Speedway, pulling the wheel hard left, hanging on to control as he fought for more speed. A glance at the oversized tack told him that the engine was cooperating. Charlotte was his track. He always did well here. Being a North Carolina boy, it was important for him to place high in Sunday's race, so the 600, for a lot of reasons. Today's training run was feeling good. He was pumped. The team members were working together like magic. The run of bad luck they'd suffered recently was about to end. He loved race week in Charlotte, culminating with the big race. Sunday, he fully intended to make and take a victory lap. He owned this track, and anybody who wanted to try and take him better be ready for a serious battle. He then felt the speed fall away as though somebody turned off the ignition. "Aw, no," he yelled as the multicolored blur of cars zoomed past him like a swarm of bees. It was only practice to make sure everything was running smoothly, but it was clear that things on the Hargrave team were not going smoothly at all. After they towed the car to the huge garage by the hauler that housed a second race car and all the tools and spare parts I might need, Mike Nugent, his crew chief, slapped him on the back, probably a fuel line. We'll get it fixed for Sunday. Dylan nodded. He didn't bother saying anything. Every one of the glum faces on his team reflected his own expression. Luckily, they really needed some luck. Preferably the good time. Or the good kind. As usual, even though it was only a practice, loads of fans were out. A number of them gorgeous young women. Dylan didn't quite know how the young women of America had suddenly decided stock car racing was sexy, but he wasn't complaining. To Dylan, they made his job a lot more interesting, I'm sure. There was at least a van load of college girls crowding him now as he made his way to the garage, but he didn't mind. They all had long hair and bare legs. Sure, the hair color was different, and some of the legs were all with their butt hugging shorts. What the And unless he learned their names, he'd have trouble telling them apart. The blonde whose t-shirt read NASCAR chick told him her name was Tiffany. 2 F's and 2 N's in the where are y'all from, girls? He asked, signing autographs on a ball cap and with his number on all the merch. Some women gave him a hard time using terms like girls, but wasn't going to stop. Political correctness was so complicated, he'd pretty much given up trying to figure it out. Me too, buddy. He believed to the depth of his being that women should get paid the same money for the same work as men, and that they pretty much could do anything they pleased. However, he also believed it was his God-given responsibility as a man to treat a woman with respect and courtesy. And if a woman wanted, if a young woman in a miniskirt wanted an autograph, then she might have to put up with him opening a door or pulling out her chair for her. California, she said. all suntanned legs and blonde hair, not looking at all offended. He'd referred to her as friends and her friends as girls. Long way from home. We especially came to see you, she said, and she'd no doubt say to any other driver that she could stop. Are you going to win on Sunday? He said, I'm going to do my best, and then posed for photos with a bunch of them, and then took the next item shoved under his nose, and he signed a copy of today's newspaper. He wondered idly how many dorm rooms had his picture been tacked up in the wall, on the wall, and shrugged. Who could figure celebrity? What? He made sure all the kids in the vicinity got autographs. Better than a lot of drivers today. And then with the final wave, said, thanks, folks. He walked past the guards back into the garage where his crew was already crawling over his car like ants over a picnic leftover. Hey, Dylan, Mike said, me and the crew are going for dinner and get a couple beers tonight. You coming? Can't. I'm going to a wedding. Who do you know getting married in Charlotte? Mike asked. Ashley. The older man blinked. You're going to your ex-wife's wedding? People have issues. It's kind of a tradition. I've been to all of them. He and Mike had known each other for years. His crew chief regarded him with eyes that had worked on metal chassis so long they'd taken the color of steel. Make sure you don't end up as the groom again. Ashley, his ex, had gone on TV twice now, claiming she were getting back together with him, but both times it had come as a big surprise to Dylan. Probably a bigger surprise to the poor sap she was set to marry tonight. I've got it covered. Why do you let her get away with this stuff? He thought about it. Ashley's trying to find a way to be happy. I wasn't much of a husband, so if she wants to have some fun at my expense once in a while, who am I to blame her? Dylan, buddies, you want you back. Not going to happen. End of chapter 1. For only 6%. What are you guys thinking? Let's see. Groovy Goose, plot twist. This is Jarrett's audition for the audiobook version of these novels. Well, they came out in like 15, 16 years ago, so I doubt it. By the way, be sure to click the like button. Adam Smith, thank you for the Canadian $6.99. I'm sorry I just joined. Are you reading a NASCAR novel? NASCAR romance novel. And it's something. Now I'm really wishing I would have went and grabbed some whiskey before. But it's what it is. I'll read some of these comments before we get back to it. By the way, again, click that like button, subscribe if you're new. I swear to God, we do more than just this. And we'll go from there. By the way, Darian's supposed to show up at some point. Juan ate the jet dryer 75 says, this sounds like a Colombian novella my parents watched. Cadillac John 1994 says, the only acceptable NASCAR romance story is what we see in the Dale Earnhardt movie with Barry Pepper. Fact. From what I've heard, that's not actually a true story, though. Evan says, I think you should read the Richard Petty autobiography, King Richard. I'll read that, I think, on my own time. Spencer says, watch, your most popular video is this. I doubt it. But yeah, Darian, Black Flags Matter is supposed to be here soon. So I'm going to have him read a chapter of it because I'll switch chairs with him and everything. Because I had chairs set up right here. For him to read it, and then all I'll have to do is where's that? There. All I have to do is just switch it over. Maybe I'll do an office tour or something after I finish embarrassing myself. But how do you guys like it so far? How do you guys like it? Because this is BFM is late. I really would want to know what you think about it all. Because I don't know what to think, and that might be him. I might have him read chapter 2 if he's here. Yeah, I think he's here. This is okay. So 21 laps to go in the world's most inappropriate NASCAR race. All right, come here. Darian's here. You got to speak right into the mic.
Okay. What's up? What's happening, everybody?
Then. Yeah, it might cut you off, but
All right, how far are you into it?
I'm one chapter in.
How many chapters are there?
22.
Oh my god.
I'm making you read one of them.
Oh my god.
Thank you, Shmeev, for being a member for 4 months. How will Kane's sauce and toast affect the romance? Hey, you want to read chapter 2? I'll slide it over to you. I did give you that, or get that caramel whiskey.
Oh.
I put Werther's caramel candy into Crown Royal for a week, and that's what happened. Here, we'll switch spots here.
All right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's maybe we should have Eric read one of these.
Yeah.
All right, so I don't even need this on.
Where is it at? On the laptop?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, right here.
Oh my god.
I'll let you read, and then you switch pages right here.
All right, cool.
You get to read it. I'm gonna go get something to drink.
All right. What's going on, y'all? Let's do this.
You have your write up on it too.
Right here.
They probably can't even hear me back here.
Oh wow. Yeah, you really got to be on this. All right, cool. All right, let's do this. Chapter 2. This is gonna be funny. Let's see. Oh, hold on. I think I might have accidentally. Let me scroll back up to it. Hold on. Let's see. Oops. Did I go up a page? What page were you on, Jarrett? Okay, because now I've lost it. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, I might have. Oh gosh. Oh, there we go. All right, sorry about that. All right, now let's do this. Chapter 2. Let's see. Kendall knew her disastrous day had sunk another notch when she accidentally locked herself out of her hotel room in her underwear. What in the... Okay, this is already turning into something. Unable to believe she could have been so easily bested by a fire door, she tried the knob, pushed her hip against the door, and it remained closed. Kendall wasn't the sort of person to walk out of a door without ensuring it stayed open for her safe return. Stressed and shocked, she discovered could do strange things to a person. Add to the natural stress of being dumped by her fiancé on the very day she was to receive the greatest compliment of her career. That's sad. Was the rising panic that she'd miss her moment of glory. She had come all the way to Charlotte to accept the sharpened pencil award in her underwear. What? Okay, so what happened in chapter 1? Oh, like.
And then you found out.
What? Oh, what is? Oh, this is gonna be. Oh, this is great. Embarrassment prickled along her skin as she stood there for a moment, wondering what on earth to do. She'd only stepped outside to see if her dress was back yet. Breathe, she told herself. Breathe, determined not to panic. She was top to toe ready. So the minute the dress arrived and she found someone to let her back in her hotel room, she grabbed her clutch purse and her neatly typed acceptance speech and go. A minute ticked by. The air felt overwhelmed, and she heard the faint noises of a large building, but saw a sign. Oh gosh. Okay, I'm still chapter 2. But she saw a sign that her but she saw no sign of her dress. There was no hotel phone on her floor. Oh gosh. Could she slide into the stairwell and creep downstairs, then somehow get a hotel employee's attention? This is only chapter 2, man. It's all over the place. Holy all right. I hope y'all are enjoying this, because this is already torture already. This is something. Yes, she thought. That's what she'd do. Tonight would be the culmination of her career, and she couldn't be late, especially since her ex and his recently outed love would be sure to think she was moping. Well, dang, like, yeah, the fiance got someone else pregnant, bro. What the hell? This is crazy. Her chin went up at the thought. She might have a broken heart, but she was hanging on to her pride with every ounce of willpower. Well, good for her. Good for her. At least the sound she'd been waiting for. The wear of the wear of the elevator, and then the clunk shh as it stopped at her floor. She jogged forward, anxious for clothing. Ahead of her, a room door opened, and a man came out, luckily without looking her way. At the exact moment the elevator doors opened, horror of horrors, over the man's solid shoulder, she saw 3 of the regional managers from her company, including her own boss, step out. Kendall didn't stop to think. In one smooth gesture, and a surprisingly quick one, thanks to the panic-driven adrenaline, suddenly excuse me, hold on, what's that say? Coursing, my bad. Yeah, suddenly coursing through her veins, she struck her hand out and caught the door the stranger had exited from before it closed. Then she slipped inside the unknown man's room, even as she sagged in relief, having whisked herself out of a sight before the trio of managers saw her. She knew what she was doing was wrong. Thankfully, this room door didn't seem to be as efficiently quick at slamming before a person as her own. But that was no excuse for trespassing. She's in her underwear, right? Yeah, so what the heck? Like, she's worried about this trespass? Like, come on, man. You gotta get clothes on. Oh my gosh, this is only gonna get worse. She only wanted to use his phone to call down to the front desk and get someone to track down her dress and another room key. And this time, she wasn't giving up until she was certain her request had been understood. She walked down the short hallway, past the bathroom and closet, into the main part of the room, noting a black case on a luggage stand and a pair of dirty socks on the floor. She averted her eyes as though that would minimize her rude intrusion into another guest's space. Perhaps she would write the stranger a polite note explaining her behavior. Oh, this is gonna get. Or would it in fact show better manners if her etiquette dilemma ended when she got to the main room and found a man there? It had never occurred to her there could be someone else inside. Before she could open her mouth to apologize, he glanced at her and said, "You're late. I'd about given up on you." Oh gosh. Kendall blinked stupidly as she looked up at a man who seemed vaguely familiar. Not another actuary. Something about his air of danger told her he didn't calculate risk for a living. He was only a couple of inches taller than she was in her heels, but muscled and
told you. And hard-bodied.
and hard-bodied. There was a scar on his cheek that seemed unnecessarily large, as though it was showing off what a tough guy he was. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. "I would never normally enter someone else's hotel room." "No problem. I'm glad Mike let you in. I was waiting for you. Come on, let's go." He looked her up and down in a way that suddenly reminded her she was still in her underwear. "Nice dress. It's a slip. Never can get the hang of ladies' fashion terms. Looks good on you. Sexy." Oh my. Man, can't read this with a straight face, bro. How can you even read this for real, like serious like that? Hey, look, to each their own, but nah, this is funny. He picked up a light gray suit jacket and pulled it on over matching slacks and a crisp white shirt, which clearly suggested somebody in this hotel got their clothes pressed in a timely manner. He wore no tie, but his black shoes shone. Oh gosh, okay. Sexy? He thought she looked sexy? Some of her embarrassment at being caught in a slip faded, okay, quite a bit. What the? He walked up to her and put an arm around her shoulders, turning her toward the door. At his touch, she experienced the strangest sense of weakness. He had the kind of energy that could carry a person with it, whether she wanted to go or not. What type of Twilight stuff is this, man? That's some, oh my gosh. When they got to the door, she realized she had to stop him or she'd be back where she started, out in the corridor with no clothes. She turned, just a sec. He reached around her for the door handle, the door at her back, and Mr. Muscle in front was the absolute definition of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Yeah, his jacket just brushed her arm, and as he looked down at her, she noted his eyes were a deep mossy green with brown and gold Wait. What's your name? Kendall Clark, she said, and foolishly stuck out her hand. Kendall, do you, Kendall, do you go by Ken, Kenny, KC? He spoke with the syrupy drawl. With the syrupy drawl that suggested he was from around these parts. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, she shuddered. I most certainly do not. It's Kendall. Solemnly. Okay. Solemnly, he shook her hand, pleased to make your acquaintance. He didn't say ma'am, but the accent implied it. You seem a little uptight there, Kendall. Everything all right? The way he said her name, it sounded like Kendall. If I could use your phone, no time, you can phone from my car. Come on. Your car. She put a hand to her head, partly to see if it was still attached to her body. Too much. Yeah, I don't know. Too much had happened today. The tug of familiarity when she looked at him didn't help. Who are you? She asked. Yeah, so you've been talking to this dude like you don't even know who he is yet. Like, who are you? Yeah, like, who are you? And if I were the guy, I'd be asking, who are you? Where are your clothes? Amusement flickered in his eyes, fascinating her. I thought Bryce was going to fill you in. My name's Dylan. My friends call me Die. and think and thunk. It all fell into place like 3 cherries in a slot machine. Although, of course, she'd never play a slot machine, you didn't have to be an actuary to figure out that the odds were stacked against the player. That's why he seemed familiar. Dylan Hardgrove was a NASCAR driver. And not just any driver. He'd caused the kind of sensation even a non-sports buff like Kendall had noticed. They're really particular with the certain words and stuff there. You know what I mean. You're ranked 15th so far this season. Damn, they roasted him. You roasted. Damn. This was before the playoff era too. Damn, this is the Chase era, so you ain't even in the top 10, bro. You getting roasted off the bat. It wasn't that she'd follow sports, but rankings and number systems of every kind appealed to her and sort of stuck in her brain. There were a lot of numbers stuck in there. Wait till Sunday, honey. Wait till Sunday, honey. All that will change. This speedway is my track. She felt his intensity like an engine revving. Bryce said you were a fan. Bryce said what? Said that? Whoever Bryce was. Sure, I promise tonight won't be too boring. We'll have dinner, make nice, and be on our way. What you mean by that? What you mean, bruh? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Oh, damn. We can catch up to Bryce after if you like. She felt as if she were in a dream. Everything was a little misty around the edges and didn't make any sense. This is a date? His smile crinkled the corners of his eyes and made that scar turn from a wobbly L to a C. What the You're right. It's not a date. Exactly. More an acting job. I sure do appreciate you being able to take it. She'd always thought Southern men had more than their fair share of charm, but this guy was in a league all of his own. NASCAR driver, oh God, how you say this? Actuarity? Is that? Okay, actuary. Okay, sorry. See, I'm illiterate. We can both be illiterate sometimes. NASCAR driver, actuary of the year, acting job. It wasn't adding up. And you handle it? This man regarded her from those mossy green eyes as though she weren't the brightest spark. How extraordinary. She's supposed to, how extraordinary. She's supposed he had ample reason to doubt her intelligence, given that she'd stumbled into his room half-dressed and seemed to echo every statement he made. For a few luxurious moments, she was experiencing what For a few luscious moments, she was experiencing what it might feel like to be a silly woman. Not silly, she reminded herself, sexy. The kind of woman rural, is that how you say it? Oh God, the kind of woman an exciting man like this might look at twice. He stared right into her eyes a moment longer, and she took that as a good excuse to stare back. Rough, tough, and gorgeous. His hair was a tumble of dark brown with the kind of streaky gold that suggested he spent time in the sun. What the His skin was weathered, the mouth uncompromising, the jaw cleft.
And that scar fascinated her.
Scar. Ooh. Okay. I don't want to be rude, but do you really need Bryce to find you dinner dates? The guy was good looking, successful, rich. He didn't look like the sort of man to need help getting female companionship. Companionship. He scratched a spot behind his ear. Bryce was supposed to explain all this. I needed an actress. You just hung all over me. You just hang all over me. Pretend we're crazy in love for a couple hours at this wedding, and we're going to. I want people thinking I have a girlfriend. That's all. I'm to appear as your girlfriend without actually being one. That's right. Can you handle it? She laughed at the bitter irony of her situation. Oh yes, I've had practice. Damn. He glanced at a watch that looked designed for a scuba diver rather than a race car driver. We'd better get going. Not much of an explanation, but she really didn't have time to get into this guy's relationships with women. Now, Now was the time to tell him that Bryce hadn't sent her. She was wearing a black silk slip from Victoria's Secret, and that no one was ever going to mistake her for a NASCAR driver girlfriend. Jesus, I know. She was the kind of woman that the men she'd been dating for 2 years dumped on a business trip so he could sit at the actuary banquet with his pregnant girlfriend. Yeah, I keep forgetting. I'm like, that's right. Like, she's in this situation because fiance cheated. Yeah, pretty much. Got someone. Damn, that's messed up. And suddenly, the thought of slogging through dinner alone while Marvin and how do you say it? Penelope canoodled in some dark corner was simply too pathetic. Kendall had a secret romance streak. She gobbled up novels and subscribed to a couple of movie channels, including on Oldie Station. She loved the moment, especially in old films, when the enraged heroine was right here. Heroine or heroine? Oh gosh, that's right. Oh, the enraged heroine slipped the out of line guy, or slapped the out of line guy. Can you tell I haven't read in a while? When she stood up and said, "Nobody treats me this way." Maybe all that reading and viewing hadn't been a waste of her time, as she sometimes thought. Maybe it was training for her moment to stand up and slap Marvin, metaphorically. A thought struck so utterly blinding in its brilliance and daring that her heart jumped unpleasantly. The NASCAR driver standing in front of her at this very minute believed she could pass as his girlfriend. Why on earth couldn't she see what that would be like? On the heels of that thought came another, even more yeah, I don't know, bro. I don't know. I don't claim to be the smartest, but damn, yeah, some of these words I've seen, I've never seen before. Oh no. Here we go. What if she showed up at her banquet with this walking shrine to testosterone? What? This man she suddenly recalled, who'd been featured in People's 50 Hottest Bachelors issue. Wouldn't that show Marvin and everyone not exciting enough, huh? What if she talked Dylan Hargrove into dropping by her awards dinner? The voice of reason that had stopped her doing anything crazy or even remotely interesting for the 31 years of her life said in a snide, evil stepmother voice in her ear, in your unmentionables. Oh. She ignored the little snide voice, not giving her time to think this through, since if she did, she'd do the sensible. Wait. I don't think. Wait, hold on.
Go back.
Oh gosh, hold on. Keep going.
They can't. I don't think they can hear me. So.
Oh, okay. All right. One more. There we go. Sensible thing, she said. I have an event myself I need to attend here in the hotel later on. Could we be back here by, say, 10? She was scheduled to receive her award after the dinner and speeches. The agenda said 10:15, and based on her knowledge of previous awards dinners, the award would be presented precisely at the time. At that time. Sure. It gives us an excuse to leave. What's your schneiding? I'm receiving an award, Kendall said, not without pride. Cool. An acting award? She'd ought to get one for this performance. She did her best to look as excited as possible. I'll explain later. What was she doing? She'd asked herself again as she walked down the hall toward the elevator. There was no answering forthcoming. All she knew was that she liked the feeling that she could pass for the date of the sexiest NASCAR driver alive. She'd felt his energy and laugh in the face of danger personally beside her. That personality was so big and so strong. She felt it spilling over and embracing her with craziness. She had no purse, no room key, nothing. Not so much as a tissue. She'd never done anything this wild in her life. Oh, it felt good. The elevator doors opened on a couple kissing so passionately, the mirrored walls had steamed up. Yeah, I guess she saw the elevator open, and there was a couple just randomly kissing. The man had pale blonde hair and wore a suit. The woman wore something black and low cut at the back. Even before the man lifted his head, Kendall was tugged. Dylan, Kendall was tugging Dylan's big head and turning for the stairs. She recognized that suit. She'd been with Marvin when he bought it in the January sales last year. Damn. Let's give them some privacy, she said in a low voice as she tugged. Kendall? Marvin sounded like a man who couldn't believe his eyes. Jerk. It's almost done. Thank goodness, the only chapter I gotta read. This is the $300 better be worth it, bro. Oh my gosh. You know that guy? Dylan asked as the fire door shut them into the stairwell. No, she said. It was true. She'd never known Marvin. Not all the time she dated him. Damn, that's deep. Helped him get ahead in the company. He'd seemed as dull as she was, which made him a safe risk. Or so she thought. As it had turned out, he was a bad risk. No, one she'd have to write off. As though her life were an insurance policy. Her heels clicked definitely as she ran down the stairs, echoing like a hail, while Dylan's heavier tread sounded like a drum. By the time she'd clicked and drummed their way, by the time they'd clicked and drummed their way past the reception floor, she had to admit she had completely lost her mind. She was getting off to go and pick up her dress and her room key, and she wasn't going to the awards banquet to sit meekly with the other onesies. She was blowing off the banquet. Predictable and safe hadn't worked out so well. She wondered what wild She wondered what wild would feel like. She had a feeling she was about to find out. Let's Oh my gosh. Oh, hold on, I skipped. There we go. Yeah, oh my gosh.
No, we need to get Danny over.
Woo! Jesus. That was painful. That was painful. That was really painful.
We need. All right, hold on. Let me make sure. I know so I can do it right.
That was
we need to get Danny over here.
really do.
All right, I saw there were some super chats. So we'll read the super chats. By the way, this guy has an appearance. Carl Edwards actually is going to be in it.
Right.
So there's that. I'm trying not to laugh my ass off the whole time, but it's hard not to. Let's see. And I'll read some of the comments too. First off, thank you, Need for Speed 5353 for being a member for 3 months. Oh, that's way behind. Saying, does Ty Dillon make an appearance in this book? Watch and find out. Shmeev, thank you for the 2. Next will be the gritty drama of BFM versus the Housefly. And the Need for Speed 5353 for 10. When are you guys reading the Iceberg BFM fanfic? Is that a real thing? I don't know. There's been I don't know. No. No. And then yeah, Danny, if you're watching, you're invited over. Doors open. I want Danny to read a chapter. I want him to. Yeah. I have no. I don't. We don't have much, but yeah, I swear I don't know if we have anything. I was supposed to go to the store yesterday. Make sure they're still good. All right. So looking in the chat here. The pain truly never ends, and it's only getting started. Yeah, we're 10% of the way through this, by the way. So it's Kendall and Dylan are the main characters. Yes, Irvin, they are. Kendall had no clothes and everything and meets a 15th place driver. Dear God. Let's see. So what, is he like 2007 Dale Jr.?
That's what I think.
Or is he Casey Kane?
Oh, maybe Casey Kane.
Let's see if there's any other things here. Driver swap again. Danny's there. I'll check. You want to check your phone real quick? I can check Twitter and see. Oh my God, there's so many people.
No. Yeah.
That screenshot. Oh no. All right. Be sure not to be too close to the mic while you do it. I'm just saying. Actually, it was Casey Mears. Well, he was 15th that year. Let's see. If they don't hook up by the end, do we have a green-white checker? Yeah. So let's get into chapter 3 before Dylan gets into Kendall. Dylan was surprised at the woman Bryce had set him up with. Bryce's female friends were fairly predictable types: gorgeous, friendly, long-legged, and big-bosomed. No guy thinks like this. We think much more simple. You can tell this wasn't a guy that wrote this. Yeah. Let me pull up the chat because the chat's about 15 seconds behind us. This one was different. Sure, she was sexy in a quirky looking way. Generous mouth. Yeah. Vote for Pedro. They probably can't hear you, so they just hear my end of it. Straight nose, pretty gray eyes, medium brown hair that curled softly around her shoulders. Trim body, not too much shape. Damn. But then he'd never known an actress who didn't diet off her curves. Oh well, all she had to do was act happy to be in his company for a few hours, then they'd be on their way. How hard was that? Truth was, it was a lot tougher than he'd thought, being named one of the People magazine's 50 hottest bachelors. That had been great for publicity, and he sure sold a lot of junk with his picture on it. That's a way to word it. He also signed a lot of autographs to girls who looked as though they should be home studying for their algebra tests and not at a racetrack hyperventilating over guys who made a life's work out of driving too fast. A lot of drivers took their wives and girlfriends around the racing circuit with them. Dylan had never done that. He'd come up in racing right when it suddenly became a sexy sport. His marketing guy liked him to have a different girl on his arm at every track. You ever heard the song Brandy? He's the race car driver version of that song. Let's see. It was a part of his brand, whatever that meant. His marketers wanted to portray Dylan as fun, and a guy who loved women. Di had no problem with that. He was a fun guy who loved women. He met some great gals, cheerleaders, actresses, models, party girls. They got publicity from being seen with him, and he got a sexy rep without any effort on his part. Seemed to everybody that everybody went home happy. For tonight, however, he needed something more. Anyone who'd already seen him on TV or mentioned on one of the fan sites that wasn't gonna cut it. Ashley would know the relationship was casual, and he needed her to believe, for both their sakes, that he was in love. He'd hoped Kendall was a hell of an actress because they were appearing before a tough audience. Kendall had her first major bit of regret when she saw the car. Low slung, red, and topless. The man was a race car driver. He was bound to go over the speed limit. Ooh. And never ridden in a car with me before. And excessive speed accounted for a high percentage of motor vehicle accidents. She paused. And the fluorescent lighting bounced off gray pavement. That car had looked like blood in the desert. She sensed terror. She halted. Then there was still time to go back. You're not exciting enough, Marvin's words floated in her head as though he were standing beside her, repeating obviously rehearsed goodbye speech. Not exciting enough, huh? She'd show him exciting. Dylan unlocked the door and opened it, and she slid into the car as though she rode into sports cars every day of her life instead of her 4-year-old Volvo. Oh my gosh, me but Kurt Busch moment. Yeah. I'm just looking at the chat too. The engine roared to life in an aggressively loud fashion, and she wasn't pleased to note that Dylan had pulled out of the parking space before she found her seatbelt and clicked it into place. The car purred as he steered out of the parking lot, but it was a menacing, as if to say, just you wait until I'm out on the road, baby, then you'll... Hold on. Just you wait till I'm out on the road, baby. The Johnny Bravo. No, I'm doing the Johnny Bravo. Yeah. Then you'll know fear. They pulled out of the garage as she swallowed a cry as he merged into heavy traffic with hardly a glance. She'd never realized a topless car would be so noisy, and what it was doing to her careful hairdo she didn't even want to think about. So he yelled over the wind rushing through the convertible. I know you're an actress and you're here in town shooting a commercial, but where are you from? Heartland? How long are you in town for? 3 days. I leave tomorrow. And then she'd be back to her regularly scheduled life. In the job she'd done for 8 years, the apartment that she'd be de-Marvinizing when she got home. When she thought about it, there wasn't even much Marvin there. An extra toothbrush and a razor, the shampoo for thinning hair, and a couple of pairs of socks and underwear, and asthma puffer. For some reason, this thing has... You have asthma, right? Yeah, for some reason, this book has a hard-on for ripping on people with asthma. Yeah, okay, well... alright, whatever. What's that dude's name? Oh, no. He's in, like, action movies, has, like, slick black hair back. They ripped on him in South Park in the Safe Space episode. Jason Segel, wasn't that it? I think. Or whatever. I'm thinking of him, but, like, him now is Marvin. So little, some fiance, had there been signs all along that she was a temporary and she'd simply ignored them. They turned onto the freeway and her date hit the accelerator. The noise increased, wind rushed at her so fast she felt breathless. Her hair whipped across her face. There wasn't much conversation. It was too difficult to be heard. Besides, she was busy holding onto her hair, so she didn't end up with lacerations on her face. She tried not to calculate their speed and turned her mind instead to Steven Seagal. Yeah. Cataloging ways she might fool people that she was A, an actress, B, sexy, and C, wearing actual clothes. The sun was low, heavy ball of dark orange. Dylan had slipped on dark sunglasses. He's Johnny Bravo. But she, of course, had none. Between driving into the sun and the air whooshing at her, her eyes began to water. They drove maybe half an hour, and then they drew up at a big old mansion decked with twinkle lights. Jay Gatsby would have felt right at home. Perhaps as her first effort as an actress, she should channel Daisy. Dylan roared towards the front of the house, and a white-coated valet immediately came forward to open the car door. She stepped gratefully onto the solid ground, resisting the urge to drop to her knees and kiss the pavement. The young man parking the car seemed more interested in her chest than her hair. At least he's honest. And let's see. And however, when Dylan walked around to join her, leaving the car running, she noticed his gaze heading in the same direction. She glanced down. The cold, rushing air hadn't merely unhinged her hair and made her eyes tear. She didn't know whether to put her hands to her hair or her chest, or simply to dive back into the car and refuse to come out. Before she'd made up her mind, everyone's attention, was caught by a young woman in a long, white, off-the-shoulder dress who cried, "Dylan!" Dylan? And ran down the stone steps as though a murderer were after her. Carried a bouquet of flowers in one hand, a lit cigarette in the other, and there was a coronet of tiny roses in her bright blonde hair. Kendall saw that her eyes were large, her lips pouty, in a way that would have looked sullen on Kendall but looked sexy on this woman. She had a lost child look about her. EDP, where are you? Oh, yeah. Combined with her blatant sexuality. In fact, Kendall didn't have a hope of channeling Daisy. This woman had channeled all of it to herself as she threw her arms around Dylan and clung like a climbing rose to a garden stake. "Hi, Ashley." "Oh, hi, Ashley." Dylan said in a voice that was soft and comforting. "Good to see you." He ran a large hand up and down the woman's delicate spine. "You got some great weather for the big day," he said in an overly loud voice. The bride shook her head so violently that her curls bounced and one pink something slid from her crown. "I can't go through with it. I'm making a terrible mistake. I never should have left you. Never. My astrologer said I'd end up with a man from my past. You've got to stop the wedding so we can get back together." What? Kendall felt as though she'd been kicked somewhere in the region of her belly button. How he'd brought her as a date to his ex's wedding. Was she forever going to be the one standing on the sidewalk of life while the parade passed her by? She wanted drama and astrologers and a man like Dylan letting her cling to like super strength sandwich wrap. Instead, she felt exactly like what she was, a half-dressed actuary at the wrong party, mentally calculating how long it would take for her to get back to the hotel in a taxi. She idly watched Dylan as Dylan patted Daisy with one hand and managed to pinch the cigarette out of her fingers with the other. "And it broke my heart into a million pieces when you did leave me, but Harrison's a fine man. He can give you all the things I never could. You can know that." He was a kid at that point. This is 2006, dude.
Right. About to get married.
Robert C. Ford, drama and astrology.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Let's see.
What the hell? This is crazy.
Let me make sure this is good. No, another rosebud tumbled as the curls were tossed again. "No, I know it was you she meant. I know it. Let's get back together again." She glanced up with misty eyes. Over the blonde head, Dylan stared at Kendall and opened his eyes wide in a do something plea. Let's be real, every guy's been there at one point. She'd been frozen in place by the spectacle, as had all the parking valets and a couple of guys in aprons who looked like catering staff on a smoke break. Dylan wanted to be rescued from this lovely woman. By her, she felt better by the second. Right? She reminded herself, actress, sexy, pretend that she and Dylan were in love. If she wanted to take part in life's drama, it's looking as if this was the perfect opportunity to step on stage. She barely knew what she was doing when she licked her lips, thrust her hips forward, and strutted forward. Daisy didn't even notice her. All her attention seemed to be given to clinging to Dylan. The parking attendant's attention was all hers, though, or still her chest. You might want to park that car before it runs out of gas, she said in a throaty voice she barely recognized. A reflex apology for her pertness popped into her mouth like a hiccup when she realized that the parking attendant had blushed to the roots of his red hair and was jogging to the driver's side of the sports car. Emboldened, she turned to do her best to free Dylan. She succeeded in getting Daisy's attention. She had Dylan's attention too. He still patted Daisy, but his gaze was fully on Kendall. She wasn't sure what to do next, but she'd agree to come with him and play her part, and she was a woman who stood by her word. Who is this? Daisy asked sharply, sounding a lot less fragile. This is Kendall, my lover, Kendall said. I'm just going to say it like that for now. Lover. Or her inner vamp did. And she just mouthed the word. And if you take your hands off Dylan, I'd appreciate it. You take off your hands off Dylan, I appreciate it. This is your new girlfriend? Daisy stared at Dylan as though she could not believe it. I'm crazy about her, he said, sending Kendall a glance so warm she tingled all over. You know what this sounds like? You know what this sounds like? It sounds like one of those stories on Tumblr back in the day where it's like, I did this, and then everyone clapped. Yeah. Let's see. I'm crazy about her, he said, sending Kendall a glance so warm she tingled all over. For a second, she felt the thrill of those words run through her system. No man had ever said he was crazy about her, and even though she knew Dylan was pretending, she still felt as though she'd become someone new and sexy and powerful. But she's so slutty. Kendall blinked. In high school, she'd been voted least likely to go skinny dipping.
Wait, what? What time of high school?
Now she was just being called slutty. The sensible part of her knew she should be insulted, but her inner rebel, who never before appeared to exist, cheered. Ashley, I am crazy in love with this woman. I want you to be happy for us, like I'm happy for you and Harrison. There it was again. Not only crazy, but crazy in love. She wasn't the only one who seemed to have a hidden acting talent. Mr. Dylan, life in the fast lane, Hargrove, wasn't bad in the acting department himself. When he looked at her with the sizzle in his gaze, she felt as though he could not wait to get her alone. Probably still could, even if. When he looked at her like that, she saw how easy it would be to respond. With incredible dexterity, he somehow unwound himself from the clinging bride and took Kendall's hand in his. His palm felt warm and large. You know what you say about big hands. Nice. He squeezed her hand in what she knew as gratitude. Kendall's an important woman in my life, so I want you to be. Hi, Ashley said, then glanced up from under her lashes at Dylan, giving a sexy pout again. Sorry, I said you were slutty. Hi, Kendall said. Sorry, I thought you were a bitch. Dylan made a choking sound and quickly faked a cough. Then he spoke to Ashley. Now let's get you married. Oh, there's more. Kendall could not imagine who was going to marry this woman who was so blatantly throwing herself at another man, but she'd already realized that the rules of Dylan's world were vastly different from her own. Then she thought about Marvin and realized that wasn't true at all. Ashley looked as though she was going to argue or worse, cling some more, when thankfully another car drove down the avenue. The bride-to-be squeaked and ran for a side entrance to the mansion. She stopped halfway, turned to Kendall, and yelled, "I'm Dylan's first wife. You know the first marriage is the only true one."
What?
Dylan, by the way, when you're done, you can literally throw it at the garbage. I play basketball. Yeah, literally just chuck it. It doesn't matter.
Oh!
Nice, he made it. Made the first one, made the second one. Dylan held on to Kendall's hand as they walked up the stone steps to an imposing oak doorway. Thanks for that. You're a better actress than I guessed. Better than I would have guessed, too, she admitted. None of this was her business, but she had to ask. Will there be any more scenes like that? I hope not, he said. And she was sure she felt him shudder. Are you sure it's a good idea to attend your ex-wife's wedding? It would hurt her feelings if I didn't somehow. Besides, me coming to her wedding is kind of a tradition. Or coming to her weddings is kind of a tradition. Weddings? This is number 4.
Oh.
Dylan kept hold of her hand as they ascended the main staircase leading to the house. To an onlooker, it would have appeared as though they were inseparable, but Kendall suspected he was afraid she'd bolt if he didn't hang on tight. He needn't have work. She was enjoying more excitement tonight than she experienced in her entire life. She wasn't going to miss this crazy wedding for anything. Her gorgeous, sexy date didn't, however, have to know that. You didn't mention that our date was to your ex-wife's wedding, she said sweetly. Huh, must have slipped my mind. They walked into a blaze of light and noise, a string quartet, almost drowned out by chatter of laughter and a great number of well-dressed people. The mansion reminded Kendall of the Biltmore estate she visited near Asheville. This mansion had the same feeling of the Gilded Age glamour and, although not quite so over the top, was still pretty amazing with the Art Deco architecture and old world interior decorating style. She'd only gotten into the Biltmore as a paying tourist. To be in the Gilded Age mansion as a guest, however, bogus, was quite the thrill. She was again reminded of the Gatsby as she glanced around, drinking in the atmosphere. Of course, Fitzgerald had lived in the area. Perhaps he'd visited this very house. A woman spotted them immediately and came forward. She was older, faded version of Ashley, wearing a soft pink suit and a corsage of orchids. Why, Dylan, he cried, holding out arms that didn't just drip diamonds. It also was like a waterfall. We'd almost given up on you, and you know Ashley planned her wedding around the NASCAR schedule, so you can be here. This has to be it's a Sunday race at Charlotte. It has to be the 600.
Yeah.
Good move, Ashley. Kendall didn't think she was ready to face the mother of the bride. She hadn't yet recovered from meeting the bride. She mumbled something about the washroom in the general direction of Dylan's ear and stepped away as his ex-mother-in-law enveloped him in a hug that looked mildly incestuous. The washroom was a grand affair, of course, with black and white tile, marble walls, crystal chandeliers, and acres of mirror. The sight of her reflection made her cry out in distress. her first ride in a convertible, and she learned a valuable lesson: never travel without a hairnet. Her hair was big, windblown, and hopelessly tangled. Any of her makeup that hadn't been wiped off by her hair was flying around her face was far too many miles an hour, or at far too many miles an hour, had smudged, run, and spread, so she looked like a rocker chick who'd gone a few rounds with a tornado. Never mind, she was prancing around at a society wedding in her underwear. Her carefully styled makeup and hair and makeup were a mess, and she had not so much as a clutch purse with her. No comb, no makeup, no nothing. Fortunately, the washroom was equipped with wonderful jars of stuff, so she sat in the blue velvet bench in front of a marble vanity and reached for her silver-backed brush. What the I'm a guy. I'm not supposed to know this stuff. Refusing to even think about how unsanitary it was to use a hairbrush of an unknown province, age, or cleanliness. This was an emergency. Redoing her soft curled style was out of the question. But once she brushed it out, her hair was a certain wavy wildness with it that could be considered deliberate. Inched off a single tiny orchid from the gorgeously blossomed plant in the black and white pot. Jesus. Yes. She's trying to hit the word limit. She tucked the creamy bloom behind her ear. With a dampened tissue, she managed to reduce her convertible-induced raccoon eyes to a kind of smudge shadow she hoped appeared intentional. Then, with a deep breath and sense of fatality, she left the washroom. Her few moments alone had given her the opportunity to realize she'd gone temporarily insane. There was no other possibility. Marvin's announcement, that triple whammy of 1, I'm dumping you, 2, for a colleague, and 3, she's pregnant, had pretty much tossed Kendall into unexplored mental territory. However, she wasn't quite ready to head back to her usual rational state. For one night, she was going to enjoy a small vacation from her usual self. Appearing for one night only was Kendall Clark, actress and girlfriend of one of NASCAR's sexiest drivers. She was determined to enjoy every minute. Dylan was, by this time, in a deep conversation with an older man he must have kept an eye out for when she reached his side, he didn't even turn, merely put out an arm around her and pulled her close. His chest was broad and warm. This seems like, if anyone's ever watched In Living Color, Men on Film, how they talk about it. Hated it. She sensed the power and strength of his athlete's build. Really, not much acting was required for her to lean into his embrace and gaze up at him as though he was the most exciting man she'd ever met. Clyde, he said, sending her a shadow of a wink that only she could see. I'd like to introduce you to my girlfriend, Kendall. Clyde is Ashley's father. Oh, Jesus Christ. It's a pleasure to meet any friend of Dylan's, Clyde said. He was a dapper man who looked to be in his 60s. He was balding with salt and pepper hair, neatly trimmed mustache. Ashley may have thought Kendall was looking slutty, but her father saw nothing amiss. His eyes twinkled when he looked at her. A pleasure indeed. She felt Dylan's arm tighten around. She smiled at Ashley's father and shook his hand, which he held on to a little longer than necessary. Ashley's mother came over and said her husband, now don't monopolize Dylan, our other guests want to say hello. Then she stood there and engaged her daughter's ex in conversation herself, leaving Kendall stuck with the husband, who moved a step closer. What a lovely dress, he said, doing his best to look down the front of it. Thank you. I do like these skimpy fashions you young women choose. Jesus Christ. I like the chat. Bald. Yeah. A recent study of media photos revealed that female stars bear approximately 59% of their bodies today in public appearances, as compared to a mere 7% in the 70s. She sighed. No wonder the fitness craze has been getting crazier. The older man blinked. What is that you're doing? What is that you do, my dear? Oops, shut up with these statistics, she reminded herself. I'm an actress. More seemed to be required, so she said, shooting a body lotion commercial. You know, I've always been interested in how they make commercials. I'd love to come by and watch your work. Oh, I don't think that'd be allowed, she said brightly as she could. She chuckled softly. I've got a lot of connections. Which company's shooting? I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll come watch you work, and then I'll take you for lunch at my club. I'm sure you'd enjoy it. The chef's famous. He has a way with steak that no one can duplicate. With the lamb sauce! Yeah. As an actuary, she dealt with a lot of older men, and she had her own method of dealing with the over-friendly. That's very kind of you, she said with a smile, but I shouldn't encourage you to eat red meat. You know that a man at your age who eats large amounts of red meat has a 64% greater chance of developing heart disease than similar-aged vegetarian? Of course, you're increasing your risk of type 2 diabetes by 50%. He was at her mouth open, and she went in for the kill. And don't even get me started on the stats for prostate cancer and colon blockages. He paled and smirked. He paled and a smirk left his face. She patted his arm. I wouldn't want to put you at risk. Right. Yes, of course. Well, he stared blankly at his drink and then pulled down on a nearby table. I better see how everything's progressing. Mabel. Someone's named Mabel there. He said sharply to his that's the mom's name. He said sharply to his wife, come along. Come along. She glanced up to find Dylan looking at her in a quizzical way. That was one of the most colorful brush-offs I've ever been privileged to witness, he drawled. How'd you know all that stuff? Darn, she hoped that he hadn't heard. She shrugged. Scientific American was all they had in the green room. He glanced at her curiously. A waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, and she took one sip, sipping deeply. Such courage, her mother would call it. She'd take courage of any nationality right now. Your beer, Mr. Hargrove? The waiter said. Dylan studied the bottle of beer, nodding, and waved away the empty glass provided. Thanks. You don't like champagne? How could anyone not like champagne? Oh, I'm getting nauseous of this. It's okay, but my contract states that the only alcohol I drink is my sponsor's beer. Isn't that a little restrictive? He shrugged. They don't put their money behind any other driver, and I don't think anybody else's booze works for me. Dylan might have said more, but soon he was surrounded by people. He didn't seem too surprised. She guessed he was the most famous person in the room and probably was used to being approached. The people checked her out the way she imagined they eyeballed his race cars, wondering if she was up to speed, pretty enough, sleek enough. She was a dinky toy compared to his usual cars. What was she even doing there? What am I even doing here? It was unlike her not to act sensible. Then Dylan looked at her with a slight grin, and the scar crinkled so much she wanted to reach out and run her fingertip over the puckered curve. He was the kind of man a woman would like. A woman like her would only worship from afar. Now tonight, she belonged by his side. Forget sensible. Thank God we're done with chapter 3. What do you think, buddy? I made you say Michael Waltrip 55,000 times.
I'd rather do that than this, to be honest with you. I'd do that in a heartbeat.
Let's look at some of the super chats here.
Oh,
No, we're almost at 100 likes. Click that like button.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chat really quick. I'm not reading that one, but you can. Next thing you know, she'll be advising him to get his Shingrix vaccine. If any other driver gets suspended this year, this will be NASCAR's new way of punishing them. We can't even hear Darian. Yeah, that's fine. It's fine. Because this mic is meant to only be from close. Need for Speed 5353. Every time you say Dylan, I think of Ty Dillon. I believe I'm going to be scarred after this stream. That's thank you for the $5 super chat on that one. Cadillac John 1994 says, Darian, I have a request for your next video. Could you talk about NASCAR's Thunder Special in Japan and the drivers that race in it? I'm interested in knowing your take on it personally.
Yeah, perhaps. I will say this. That won't be the next video, though. The next video is Return to NASCAR Bus.
Ooh, okay. Creative Name says this would be an effective punishment. You know what's funny? My throat's hurting more from this than announcing iRaces.
You're actually having fun doing it.
I had fun with the iRacing. Yeah. Wait for Mike Harmon to appear and take all the women, not just Kendall. From Schmeeve. Let's see. Juan 8, the Jet Jar 75. I have never been more disgusted of NASCAR in my life. This is a real part of NASCAR history. Yeah. Chapter 4. Kendall discovered that when you acted as though you were interesting and fun and sexy, a lot of people went along with the charade. Of course, being with Dylan pretty much guaranteed that people were going to form different impressions of her than they would if they saw her in her office job in her suit. And strangely enough, the same phenomenon worked backwards. The more people treated her as though she was interesting, fun, and born to party, the more fun and party girl she became. Wedding guests came up and talked to her. They told her jokes that made her laugh, and she said things to make them laugh in return. Okay, they were all men talking to her, but that was all right. Her flirting skills were rusty, if she'd ever had any. I wish Gilbert Gottfried was still alive so he could read this. It was nice to give them a workout. Whether her newfound popularity with the opposite sex was because she was here with a NASCAR driver, barely dressed, or had suddenly sprouted a sparkling personality, she didn't know or care. She was Cinderella at the ball, and with Prince Charming. Naturally, midnight would come, and she'd soon be back to a regular, unexciting life, with no glass slipper left behind to change her destiny. So what? For once, she was following a mad impulse, and heck with the consequences. I could say bitch, we didn't say hell. Now, exciting enough, huh? How she wished Marvin could see her now. Dylan came and took her arm, and and since he was by far the most interesting man at the wedding, she beamed at him. Isn't this a beautiful or a wonderful party? She said. It was amazing. She could say the stupidest things, and people thought she was a witty conversationalist. I'll read that right after we get past chapter 4. It's a nightmare, he said, not appearing to find her conversation at all that witty. Immediately, the truth slapped her, and she, in turn, slapped at his hand slapped a hand over her big mouth. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot. This must be torture watching her ex-wife get married. And the Daisy Ashley was exactly the same sort of woman for whom a man could carry an eternal flame. He glared at her in annoyance. She won't get married if she doesn't believe you and I are crazy in love. So, would you stop drooling on everything in pants and start drooling on me? Damn. Oh, her mind was feeling a little hazy. It was thirsty work, all this flirting, and she was wondering if she might be one flute short of an orchestra. Or maybe that should be one flute too many. She'd stick with water at dinner. She decided in the meantime she'd try to work out what Dylan meant. I don't understand what's going on. Are you still in love with her? No! He pulled her aside in a low voice. This guy's her fourth groom. She went to some astrologer who I would personally love to strangle. This quack told her that she's already met the guy that she'll be with, but she threw him away. She got in her head that it was me. She'd seen Dylan and Ashley together. Both were gorgeous, larger than life. They were Clark Gable and Carol Lombard. Maybe the astrologer was right. He shook his head. Our marriage was a disaster. Still, you've never married again? I'm smarter now. He glanced behind Kendall, and his eyes narrowed. Uh-oh, here she comes. If I know that look, and I do, she's planning on something crazy, like not getting married so she can run off with me. Remember, this is your fault. As she opened her mouth to ask what exactly was her fault, he kissed her. Oh my. Oh my. Better than champagne was the first thought that skittered through her head. His arms came around her and pulled her in so tight she was pressed against the full length of him. Darian's walking out. Oh, yum. Oh, yes. Oh, yes, yes. He was sexy and strong. And in that second, she could imagine a woman loving this man and never wanting to let him go. Then Ashley Daisy fled her mind as she kept on kissing her, or he kept on kissing her. It'd be more entertaining if the two girls started. He tasted good and felt good. Her arms went around his neck, and he molded her body to his, with nothing between them but her slip and denim bra and a pair of panties. She felt the roughness of his jacket, the buttons on his shirt, the warmth of his skin. A soft moan startled Kendall back to reality. For a humiliating moment, she thought she'd done the moaning, but when Dylan raised his head and looked behind her, she turned and followed his gaze. It wasn't Kendall, but the bride was staring at Dylan with a baffled mixture of longingness and sadness. I remember when you used to kiss me like that, she said.
It's her wedding, bro.
Horrible person. That was a while ago, he said. But in a gentle way, he kept his arms around Kendall, rubbing her arm up and down while he said it. I was just looking to be happy, Ashley said, her big blue eyes looking misty. Kendall wondered if she'd ever heard anything so wretched. If the woman was wondering about her happiness on her wedding day, then it didn't bode well that she'd found it. Since this didn't seem to be one of those weddings where it was deemed bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the ceremony, Kendall soon had a chance to judge the upcoming union herself. A self-important young man strolled up to Kendall and was reminded again of this guy was a modern-day version. She couldn't have said why she thought he was from new money until she looked more closely. His tux was too obviously expensive, his shoes too shiny. When he took Ashley's hand, he held it in such a way that an extraordinarily large diamond engagement ring winked at them, catching the light and flashing a camera bulb going off. Like a camera bulb going off. Ashley smiled at her fiance, but then turned her attention back to Dylan. Kendall could understand why. He was much more dynamic of the two. Hargrove, the Gatsby said with a curt nod. Bryant, he nodded back. Animosity crackled between these two. No one bothered to introduce her. The minister's here, the group said. Your mother wants you to take your place. Okay. Hold on. Okay, Ashley's voice wobbled, and she looked at Dylan with such naked appeal that Kendall hoped someone would protest the marriage, preferably the groom. Be happy, Ashley, Dylan said, stepping in front of the man she was about to marry, kissed his ex-wife on the lips. The groom took Ashley's hand and dragged her away, and she left with the same enthusiasm as a child that leaves Santa. Well, what? Oh, no. Well, your kissing her silly should cure Ashley of her infatuation, Kendall said.
Yeah, bro, she's about to get married, bro. And first off, she invited the ex-husband, who happens to be a mediocre NASCAR driver, and she's like just going crazy, like, oh, I want you, I want this and that, bro. She's on the fourth husband. What is it? The fourth husband, right? The fourth freaking marriage. And I would have to think, since this is kind of based on some real life events, that this has probably actually happened before, that there was probably someone who's about to get married, and I don't know, like, they just were upset that they couldn't be married to a NASCAR driver anymore. I don't know, man. This is crazy.
Still, the conservatory was beautiful, with the tiny white lights in the trees and a single harpist playing by candlelight. They sat in rows of white folding chairs on the bride's side. After an interval of shuffling, some quiet whispering, and the odd giggle, the parents filed into the front row. Then Harrison Bryant seemed to appear from behind a burning bush. Although she imagined there was a side door between the blooming garden bush that was currently imitating. I don't even know half these words, man. Okay, with the groom, there was an older man, presumably the best man. The thought flashed through her mind that he didn't have any friends his own age. The two took their places in front of a flower-decked podium, while a man in a dark suit holding an engraved binder came from the other side and took his place behind the podium. When the justice of the peace had found his place in the binder and adjusted the small reading light, there was the usual anticipatory pre-bride silence. Kendall waited, barely breathing, for the groom to be left standing at the altar, a fear the groom apparently shared from the anxious way he kept glancing behind him. But soon enough, the wedding march played, and in came the flower girl with a mass of blonde curls and huge blue eyes, enjoying her importance so immensely that there was a snowstorm of flower petals wherever she went. Behind her came the two bridesmaids, who looked as though they had better things to do, and finally Ashley, who gnawed at her lip all the way down the aisle. However, no one, not even the bride, tried to stop the wedding. And when the justice of the peace announced, "You may kiss the bride," she felt Dylan's arms droop slightly as his muscles relaxed, and she'd realized he'd been as tense as she was. The chapters are split in half. After the wedding came a sit-down dinner reception. Usually when Kendall went to a big do, she and Marvin were close to invisible. Conversation tended to be small when people found out they both were actuaries. But Dylan's table felt like the table at the center of the universe. He was hailed, backslapped, joked with, teased, and flirted with so often, she wondered how he managed to get any food down. He bore it in good part, managed to charm the women, talk racing jargon with the men, and still find time to fiddle with Kendall's hair. Place an arm around her shoulder and whisper supposed secret. His behavior kept her on edge and fluttery, so it was hard to eat anything, since one of his whispered intimacies was to remind her that she was supposed to be crazy in love with him too. She let herself do what she'd wanted to do all evening. She traced the shape of that scar with her fingertip. She felt the tiniest thread of scar tissue and a slight dent. His skin was warm, and beneath the pads of her fingers, she felt the slight scratch of stubble. When she would have removed her hand, he took her wrist and kissed it. Her pulse jumped as though it wanted to kiss him back. Down, girl, she reminded herself. It's pretend. And as she made her way through the high-class version of the banquet rubber chicken, she felt a stab of guilt. She should be at her own actuary dinner eating some rubber chicken of her own. Marvin's behavior didn't it didn't take responsibility to her employer. If only her ex-fiance had told her earlier, given her time to get used to the heartbreak and humiliation, she might have handled this evening with her head instead of her damaged heart. Maybe her behavior wasn't entirely appropriate, but so long as she got to the banquet before the speeches, she doubted she'd be missed. While the ritual wedding toasts were made, she kept an eye on her watch. The first dance between the bride and groom had Kendall blinking in surprise. Ashley seemed to have forgotten all about Dylan, and for this dance anyways, she had her eyes on no one but her latest husband, and Harrison looked as though he cradled the most precious being in the world. Why that man was the one crazy in love, Kendall thought. She hoped he didn't end up heartbroken. It wasn't a great feeling. A glance at her watch told her it was 9. After the actuary dinner, which would have been winding up about now, coffee would have been poured, and there would be the usual speech from the president of the association that had never been clocked in at shorter than 60 minutes. I should really be getting back to my hotel. I need to get my acceptance speech from my room. Fine by me, let's get out of here. Since they'd been snuggling all evening, she wasn't at all surprised when he took her hand. A woman could get used to this guy, she thought, and this woman better not. They made their way unimpeded out the front door, which made her sigh with relief. Probably it was rude to leave without saying goodbye, but in Dylan's case, goodbye undoubtedly would have taken hours. So, you'll definitely come to my banquet with me, she asked as they walked into the still warm air in the May evening. Yeah, it's the 600. He glanced at her with a tiny frown pulled on his brow together. What exactly is this award? Does it matter if she told him the truth about herself? She felt as though all the magic would drain out of the evening. Dylan glanced up at the night sky, twinkling like a sea of glitter. And see, the thing is, I'm a broad-minded guy, but I've got sponsors, fans. He glanced at her and looked a little embarrassed. I hate to be acting like a prude here, but if you're an adult movie actress of the year or something, and believe me when I say I think that's a great honor, then I'm going to have to pass. Adult movie? For a second, she was stunned, then sucked in her breath and said, do you mean pornography? Hey, listen, I'm all for good, clean fun in the privacy of your living room, but like I said, I've got to be careful. She turned to him. You think people would pay to see me in sex movies? Absolutely. Oh. Thank you, she said, feeling better than she'd felt all night, but I'm not actually a porn star. That crooked grin was aimed her way, and with the crinkling of that scar, that for some reason made her weak at the knees. You kiss like one. Before they do anything, she better get this man tested. She tamped down her delight with feigned severity. And how would you know what a porn star kiss is like? His evil chuckle was drowned out by the approaching sports car. The low red car zoomed up, and Dylan opened the front door for her, then walked around to tip the valet and slid into the driver's seat. She found herself back in the convertible, flying along the highway at 1,000,000 miles an hour. When she tilted her head back to look up at the sky, it was a kaleidoscope where the pattern kept changing too fast for her to keep up with. So, you're going to tell me what this award's about? Dylan yelled over the combined noise of the road and the wind. No, not yet, but I promise it's perfectly respectable. I'm trusting you here, Kendall. Trust, she said emphatically, is the cornerstone of good business. You know, honey, you are an interesting woman. You talk like an accountant with the same mouth that kisses like a porn star. Well, trust me, all resemblance to porn stars end with kissing. He laughed and threw his arm around her shoulder. Why don't you let me decide? Then that's when she realized he had misconstrued her meaning. He blinked at him. He appeared more than pleased by the notion of having sex with her. In 2 years, Marvin had never looked that interested. But then, Dylan had only known her for a few hours, and he thought she was someone else. Was it her imagination, or did they travel back to the hotel a lot faster than they traveled to the wedding? Impossible to tell. But before she could believe it, he was pulling up to the hotel. Oh, cool. He was using valet parking. She felt rich and important as she slid from the car. Yet, another parking attendant held her door open for her. Good evening, Miss Grieve. The doorman said, then nodded her, Miss, or Mr. Hargrove, and then Miss. When she swooshed through the door and found herself in the main floor lobby, she blinked. There was the illuminated sight of confirming that the actuary banquet was in ballrooms A and B. Where are you going, Dylan asked, as he fell into step with her. The actuarial, the banquet. I'm going to take a peek and make sure that I have the time to run upstairs and grab my speech. Didn't change the page. There we go. He studied the sign and then glanced at her. You're kidding me. No, she said, feeling like Cinderella would have if she transformed back into the downy drudge before Prince Charming's eyes. Instead of looking disappointed or jumping into his race car and zooming off, he tipped the back of his head and laughed with a big booming sound. This I have to see. Most of the doors in ballroom A and B were shut, but she found one that was propped open. She crept towards it and stuck her head inside. Amazingly, the president had kept it short this year. He was winding things up. There was no time to get herself another key to run upstairs and get the speech. She barely made it here in time. Oh well, she practiced her speech so many times she mostly memorized the thing anyway. The president of the association was praising someone who exemplified the qualities of them. This year's winner combines a keen mind, exceptional organizational abilities. She's been top. What are you doing here? Dylan whispered, coming behind her and kissing her neck. Basking, she said. And keep doing that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to present to you this year's Sharpened Pencil Award to Kendall Clark. Ha, she said, tipping her head back to smile at Dylan. Talk about good timing. This is your award? Yep. I have to give a speech. Kiss me for luck. He did, and the tingle on her lip was just the fuel she needed to make the long walk to the podium. All the dark-clad men and women at the tables in ballrooms A and B were clapping. They were clapping for her. The tiniest voice that ruled her, sleeping and waking for so many years, was throwing some kind of hissy fit because she couldn't hear it over the sound of polite applause. We are 22% of the way through this.
I leave. I'm gonna have a giant beer and steak. Just I need to feel manly. I need to feel manly again.
We could. I mean, Riss is working tonight.
Jesus.
By the way, look at that like button. We're 2 away from 100. Let's see. I love the chat. You guys are funny. Let's read some of these super chats and different things like that. Red Dog 81, thank you for the 10. The ironic thing I've realized listening to you guys, we all need girlfriends. Keep up the good work. This is hilarious. I got a girlfriend. Need for Speed 5353, thank you for the gifted membership. That's awesome. I appreciate it. Shmeev, thank you for the 199. This relationship is moving faster than Xfinity Chenchi. Shmeev also says for 199, perfect time for NASCAR on Fox. Crank it up. Oh, probably about the end. All right. Awesome. You guys are awesome. Keep it up. And Irvin Alvarado, what's a girlfriend? Oh my God. All right. We are 22% of the way through already. And look at that. It's almost in an hour. Chapter 5. She walked to the microphone and Jesus Christ, we spent like the first quarter of this book on the damn speech. Chapter 5. She walked to the microphone and there was the president of her organization, Gordon Carstairs. It sounds like a Cars character. Staring at her as though he couldn't believe his eyes. Mr. Carstairs had been a friend of her father's and ran the only insurance company in Portland larger than the one she worked at. Thank you very much. She reached forward to kiss him, Hollywood style, and he pushed the award forward. The sharp point of the trophy, a sharpened pencil, poked her right above her heart. Somehow that seemed significant. She stared out at all of those dark suits and dresses, all of the white moon faces staring at her. Ladies and gentlemen, guests and colleagues, trust is the cornerstone of our business. Trust, the word that seemed to shimmer in her mind. Each letter sizzled neon. Trust. She repeated the word, hearing the echo around the still waiting room. 300 ghostly faces stared at her. Marvin sat about 3 tables from the front. Through some trick of his overhead light, or maybe fluorescent bounce of his pale blonde hair, he stood out. If she scanned her gaze to the left to the entrance and exit of the ballroom, there was Dylan standing with his back against the wall watching her. In the moment, everything inside her went still. The silence lengthened to become palpable. Something you could feel in the air like humidity. She heard some shuffling and a couple of cleared throats. Somewhere, somebody was starting to chat in a low voice. She felt dizzy and realized inside her she'd sailed blindly into the perfect emotional storm. She glanced at the sharpened pencil award he'd placed on the podium, so straight that the pencil was so sharp. What? Grammar, and people say my grammar's bad. And she started to speak. I'm honored that you would choose me for this prestigious award, but I can't accept it. Actuaries weren't the most emotive of souls, and there was not so much as a gasp from the audience. She noticed that the chatting stopped, and the silence felt keener. She smiled. I know these speeches are usually pretty boring. Let's face it, our jobs are pretty boring. But what we do is important. Without us and our calculations, retirees could run out of money before running out of life. Insurance companies would go bankrupt if we didn't calculate the risk. What we do matters. She took a sip from her glass of water that had been provided. I talked about trust, but there's more than just trust involving in being a good actuary. We also need to act with our integrity and good judgment. She looked straight at Marvin. I've also prided myself on my judgment, but somewhere I went badly wrong. I became engaged to a man who's been carrying on with another woman under my nose. We three are colleagues in the same office, and I was clueless. She shook her head appalled. She had everyone's attention now. I think a person who is so blind to the kind of deceit and drama going on in her own life might not be sharp enough to catch the discrepancies in her work. She paused to take a sip more of water. Her hands were surprisingly steady. Trust, integrity, and good judgment are the three cornerstones. And what kind of judgment are you showing now? And her voice railed. But a building has to have four cornerstones or it will topple. Honestly, ever heard of a pyramid? Honestly, I think the final piece I have lived dishonestly for the last 4 months through no fault of my own except blindness. My colleague and fiance informed me earlier today, this evening, that he's in love with somebody else. I've been blind, foolish, and I've been living a lie. So, you see, I am the wrong person to accept this award, although I hope one day to be worthy of it. Thank you. As she turned and walked slowly away, leaving the sharpened pencil pointing in the air like a rude middle finger. I watched his date of the evening with a combination of shock and admiration. Okay, so she already pretty much figured out that Bryce hadn't sent her, and she wasn't like any actress he'd ever met. But her speech still shook him to his she'd been dumped by a cheating fiance, if he understood her speech correctly, and was refusing an award that probably was meant a lot to her on ethical grounds. Wow. He'd pretty much written off the evening as a nightmare before it even started. How he ended up having such an amazing time? There was something about this woman. Her quiet sexiness, her clear intelligence, and her obvious integrity that got to him. He wondered why the evening had been so different than he'd imagined. And then it hit him. He hadn't been bored. Boredom had become a part of his life so often recently that it was like an allergy. He'd become so used to it that when the symptoms cleared up, he felt incredible relief. Of course, not a soul in this world knew about this problem of his. Only a loser would whine when he had everything he ever wanted. And he wouldn't do that. He flipped the bird to his family, his predestined future, and pretty much the world a lot of years ago, and set out to provide himself. Here he was with everything he ever wanted, and if sometimes it all got to be too much of the same old, and then he'd suck it up and shut up. Faking being on top of the world, as it was pretty easy when everybody already accepted that's where you were sitting. But when he last laughed from a ticklish place deep in his gut, that would be so accessible as a kid was so unreachable now. He couldn't remember until tonight when his supposed party girl had announced she wasn't an actress at all, but an actor. No wonder Kendall had kept him the opposite of bored. Between grabbing him back from Ashley, slapping down his ex-wife's dirty old daddy, and now, I swear it's what it put, and now standing up there and pretty much blowing off her career because of her principles, she not only amused him, she won his admiration. When she came off the stage, the applause was tepid. The glances sent her way were everything from confused to disbelieving. She appeared more shocked by her behavior than anybody. She soon looked like a rookie after his first major race. She was pale and shaky and looked as if she might puke. What she needed was for somebody to take her mind off the ordeal. "Hey," he said, "great speech. Thanks." Would it hurt your career if I you? If I think I just threw away my career, she said in a voice of stunned shock. Then I guess this can't hurt. Leaned in and slapped one on her. Oh God, what was it about his mouth and of hers that he found so what was it about this mouth of hers that found her so irresistible to him? It talked smart, kissed sexy. He was barely aware of the hundreds of people in the room, except that he wanted them all gone, have her alone. He raised his head, and she said, "Let's get out of here." Oh, wonderful. He grinned at her. "You must have read my mind," Kendall, a man, said in a furious tone. He and Kendall both looked at the guy and recognized him from the elevator. The nervous-looking redhead clinged to his arm. Must be the one he'd been kissing. How could you be so small-minded and vindictive? You made a fool out of me. Dylan's date looked at the guy for a long moment. No, I didn't. You did that all by yourself. Dylan scooped her hand into his, and they left without a backwards glance. What do you want to do now? He asked her. As they crossed the mostly deserted lobby. I'm thinking of locking myself in a bathroom somewhere and throwing up and doing a lot of moaning. He chuckled. No, you're not. You totally impressed me. Probably a lot of other people too. I'm looking at what they're saying in the chat. Pull up the chat on your end. I did. Her eyes were serious, but with an edge of dreaminess he liked. Yeah, you told off a whole room of suits, and you never raised your voice once. If I was the president of that association, I'd be getting your ex's ass fired and making you CEO of the company. The line between her brow disappeared. What? Yep, you're the one with the guts and integrity. Thanks. They walked a little farther. You're right. We should celebrate. I did something I've never done before. I stood up for myself and told someone off. You've never done that before? Not really. Well, she glanced at him. Actually, earlier tonight, but that was acting. I have to say, you're doing great for a beginner. Thanks, she sighed and gazed up at him. You know what I want to do now? Oh, God. What? I want to do something else I've never done before. Do you have any ideas how many things I've never tried? He was curious. No. She started listing off things on her fingers in one hand. I've never went scuba diving. I've never, even though I love the ocean. Well, we're kind of far from it here. And they don't let you go out if you've had a drink or two, she gasped. And that's another thing. You know, I've never been drunk. Didn't you even turn 21? Of course I did, but I was studying for a final exam. I couldn't waste a whole study night to go drinking. Now that's just plain tragic. He said that. Where are we going now? They walked outside the hotel. The air was warm and dry. Even though it was dark, he slipped his sponsor's shades on, hoping the suit and the sunglasses would make him look less recognizable. There were so many race fans in town for Sunday. He was liable to be mobbed if he was recognized. I figured out the perfect thing for you. Something I've never tried before. That's right. I'm guessing you've never raced a stock car before. No. She licked her lips and gazed at him. That little line appearing between her brows. I thought I'd move my way up through my list, starting with easy things. I'm not sure I should be racing quite yet. Trust me, you'll love it. Skips ahead. Oh my gosh, I clipped him. I'm going too fast. I can't hold on. I'm going to crash. Dylan was getting as much of a kick out of watching Kendall play the new NASCAR video game as she was playing. Like 06. This would have been... No, this would have been Chase for the Cup.
Oh, okay.
Her fingers were welded to the controller and her eyes wide as she stared at the moving images on screen. She'd never be a beauty, but there was some things very appealing about the way she gave her whole focus to what she was doing now. Whether it was playing a video game, telling off her ex, or kissing him, when she played 4 games in a row, she finally threw up her arms and gave up. There were 6 of them at the table, his crew chief, a few guys from the team, and Carl Edwards.
Carl Edwards, what the? Oh, hold on. We got a Carl Edwards cameo. Carl Edwards made his first cameo. That was so random.
A little younger than Di, but he'd become a good friend. They'd both be featured in People's 50 Hottest Bachelors issue. And what had started out as a good-natured ribbing about which of them was really the hottest turned into a friendship. Since Carl was a lot better at video NASCAR. Wow. He'd taught Kendall. By the time she'd mastered the basics, they were fast friends. And he was toasting to her success. Kendall, you're a natural, Edwards glanced at Di. with that grin that melted a lot of women's hearts and signaled to Di that trouble was on its way. We should get her a ride, Di. She'd be a great driver. Are you kidding me? I crashed 3 times, lost control once, and I'm pretty sure I made the yellow car blow up. Sounds like a good day at the track to me, Carl said with a toothy grin a lot of women seem to go for. Kendall laughed as though Carl was the funniest guy in NASCAR. He had to be a few years younger than she was. Carl didn't seem to mind though. In fact, Dylan might have to remind his fellow driver to find his own woman before that night got much older. That was chapter 5, ending with a Carl Edwards cameo. Noah's hair says this is why he left. Mr. Steal Your Girl is here. Oh my god. Let's see. Carl gets turned and the big one begins. Oh my god, there's so many people. Let's see. I'm crying right now. Oh my god. This is something. I'll read a couple of these chats. There's no super chats, so Brad Keselowski won this race. Suddenly, Jack Roush walks in. Carl, get your seat fitted. I'm on the edge of my seat, says Sean. I love the Mr. Steal Your Girl is here. Edwards will not make it to the flag. I'm scared. A video game reference and cousin Carl. It's all over the place. What the fuck? Carl Rizwards. Oh my god. Oh my god. Let me get a drink of water. I might need to join you in getting like a steak, even though I had a 20-ounce of ribeye last night. Drug dealer said, "What do you want?" Author said, "Yes." Thing 22. Yeah, Chase for the Cup 2005. That'd be the game. EA Sports. It's in the love novel. All right, chapter 6. Kendall woke up to the sound of moaning. Unfortunately, she was the one doing the moaning. She drunk champagne at the wedding and then had a beer while playing that video game. She was definitely what people referred to as cheap drunk. Maybe she ought to put that on the list of never dones before embarking on too many firsts. Underneath her pounding head and slightly rocky stomach, she was feeling a persistent euphoria, however. Last night, she had been the kind of woman she admired, strong, adventurous. Dylan Hargrove had called her a kick-ass. I like how everyone, whoa! She quite liked that view of herself. Of course, in the racing world, being kick-ass was no doubt a good thing. In the actual world, it wasn't. She wasn't so sure. No one in history had ever refused the sharpened pencil award. It had felt like the right thing to do when she'd stared right at Marvin and his pregnant girlfriend and realized how incredibly blind she'd been. But had she gone too far? She rolled out of bed, showered and dressed. Today, she was going home, back to her life, her job and the humiliating reality of facing her ex-fiance's new love growing rounder every day with his kid. To think that 24 hours ago, everything had been so different. She'd still been blindly engaged, arrogant enough to think that she deserved the Sharpened Pencil Award, and had never met a NASCAR driver in her life. Dylan, what an extraordinary date he'd turned out to be. Sexy, funny, gorgeous, aloof. She suspected he was an easy man on the surface and one it was very difficult to get to know. He'd help make her sure she got her key, and then when they returned to the hotel room in the wee hours of the night, and he'd given her a brief but scrumptious kiss outside the door. She hoped he hadn't left Charlotte yet. She wanted to say goodbye. She could phone him, but no. She should thank him in person for the fun she had last night. As she reached for the hotel room door, someone knocked. Her pulse jumped. Dylan, was he thinking of her when she was thinking of him? When she opened the door, it was the regional manager Bob Bream.
No, actually went like this. Oh wait, hold on. Okay, her pulse dropped. Dylan, is that you? Just like this is like what makes it funnier too. I'm like thinking of these like random just deep voices and like I'm kind of having fun with the characters too. Like some of the men like in the story, I'm just gonna pretend that it's Mike Harmon as the main love interest. So when you talking about this like most sexiest driver, I'm just gonna think of Mike Harmon the whole time, basically.
Nobody's sexier than Mike Harmon. That'll get taken out of context.
Oh yeah.
Oh my God, sirens are coming. They know I'm in danger. As she reached for, let's see, blah, 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 it was Bob Bream standing there. With him was the VP of Human Resources, Glenn S. Oh, she said with surprise. Hello, would you like to come in? If it's convenient. Of course. Of course. As the sirens go by, it felt strange to have two of the muckety mucks from her company in her hotel room. She wished more than ever she'd passed on that beer last night. She had a feeling a clear head was going to be called for. Sorry to barge in on you like this, Kendall, Bob said. He was a little fussy man with a bald head, bald and thick glasses, who kept his desk so clean dust didn't dare settle. Glenn was tall with an athletic build going to fat. He had thick lips and a ready laugh. That's all right. She glanced around. There were two chairs at a small table under the window and a third chair at the small desk where her computer sat. Please sit down. She carried herself from the chair from the desk closer to the table. Thank you. We would have liked a more conventional meeting space, but Glenn raised his hand. We gave up on all our meeting rooms and we wanted privacy. Really, it's fine. She was all packed up since they were leaving today, so the room was as impersonal as any meeting space, as if they all turned their backs to the bed. Well, Bob was obviously the designated speaker at this meeting and seemed as though he wasn't sure where to begin. Her churning stomach now had nothing to do with alcohol. Kendall, your speech last night was a surprise to all of us. Those of us in senior management, had a meeting in the morning, in person, and conference call. We all agreed your speech, your behavior, in fact, was inappropriate. Her feeling of being a kick-ass woman began to dissipate faster than the snow beneath a blowtorch. Perhaps you're right. I admit I didn't intend to say what I did. I should have taken more time to think it over. Yes, Glenn agreed. You should have. As I'm sure you've realized, she said, Marvin, Fulford, and I, and then she's cut off. Yes, indeed, very distressing situation. Marvin came to us last night, very upset. He held nothing back. We want to know, Kendall, he was candid in his relationship with Miss Varsan. made you very emotional. Anger swept through her like a brush fire. He broke our engagement less than an hour before the banquet. I wasn't emotional. I was betrayed, angry, and heartbroken. The situation, as I'm sure you can understand, is untenable. We simply cannot have these kind of personal dramas affecting our work. Of course not, she agreed. I assure you that I will do my job, as I always have, with the utmost professional integrity. However, I have been blind to not see what was going on under my nose. It was the lack of that sight in myself, which made me refuse that award. I wouldn't have been right to accept it. Nevertheless, your speech publicly embarrassed our company and one of our senior employees. An employee who has been humiliating me for months behind my back. She had tried to stay calm. She reminded herself, even as her voice shook. Kendall, Bob went on with a differing tone. She supposed he thought he had the right to treat her like a child. I've known you a long time, and I believe you've got a wonderful future ahead of you. Oh, good, she breathed out. I thought for a second you were going to fire me. Bob cleared his throat, looked at the blank table as though searching for something to straighten or tidy. Of course not. However, we are a respected firm. We cannot allow people involved personally to affect the workplace. Then you might want to separate Marvin and Penelope. We're going to move Miss Varsan to payroll. She's accepted the new position. What are you going to move me? In the mailroom, Glenn spoke up. This was obviously his leg of the dog and pony show. We're transferring you to the branch office in Aurora. You'll be assistant branch manager. She blinked. The storefront insurance office that isn't even open yet. I'm not an insurance clerk. I'm an actuary. I'm sorry, Kendall, but we think this is best. As you pointed out, the Aurora location won't be viable for a few months. We're offering you a 3-month stress leave. When you return to work, you'll report to the Aurora office. Stress leave? Stared at one to the other. You think I need stress leave? The silence was so thick, she heard Glenn's shoes scrape the carpet and shifted. And Marvin, he'll remain where he is. We feel we've solved the problem. But Marvin was the problem. This isn't open to discussion, Kendall. The decision has been made. She looked from one to the other, unable to believe what she was hearing. Marvin kept his job. The 2 women he'd been involved with got demoted. She was sent off on stress leave for 3 months. What if I refuse? Your position has already been relocated to Aurora. You have no job in Portland's office. All those years, all the training, the hours she put in, the loyalty she felt for the company was so blatantly unfair, sexist, and wrong that she felt like screaming. An outburst would only confirm their obvious conclusion that she was too emotional. So you're demoting me? Not at all. This place is an excellent opportunity to learn another part of the business. Consider it a sideways promotion. She wanted to tell them to take their measly sideways promotion and shove it up their ass, but she had 31 years of good girl behavior against one short night of rebellion. There was no contest. Now, at the same time here, Dylan was looking for a missing sock when his cell phone rang. Dylan, the soft voice of his ex-girlfriend or ex-wife greeting him. Ashley, aren't you supposed to be on your honeymoon? Honestly, Dylan, you've never listened to a word I say. He'd heard that line often enough when they were married. Our plane doesn't leave till Thursday. Right. There was a pause. Since he was the ex-husband, asking about their wedding night didn't seem appropriate, although he couldn't think of anything more inappropriate than her calling him on their first morning married together. What's up? I wanted to tell you how happy I am you found someone special. At first, I thought she was awful, but then I saw you kissing, and I could tell that you and Kendall are totally in love. Her voice lowered. It's the only thing that made me go through with the ceremony last night. If you're happy and in love, then maybe I can find it too. Oh, great. He and Ashley had 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 a pretty wretched marriage, all told. Between the yelling and the scenes and her being in love with the excitement of what he did and then freaking out before every race, there'd been little peace. Then there was the issue of her being a spoiled little rich girl and him being equally spoiled little rich boy. They hadn't stood a chance. Still, he harbored a stubborn affection for Ashley. She was flighty and spoiled, but she was also sweet. When she'd said she wanted a divorce, he'd felt nothing but relief. It took him months to realize that when she'd thrown those words at him, she'd been loving the drama and expected him to talk her out of leaving. In the 3 marriages between, she still hadn't given up on getting back together. He was fairly certain that she was drawn to the excitement of the world. But what she really was craving was stability. He also wished she'd figure out soon that she didn't love him any more than he loved her. However, to blow her off would have been like kicking a little Persian kitten for scratching up a couch. He couldn't do it. Ashley's biggest problem was that she was born fool for romance. Being a 3-time loser at marriage hadn't dampened her sentimental notions an iota. Usually, her starry-eyed romantic routine irritated him, but in this case of him and Kendall, he was glad Ashley had decided to see true love where none existed. Kendall might not have been a real actress, but she ended up doing a good job last night of acting crazy for him. I am telling you, Ashley, that woman means the world to me like you mean the world to Harrison. I know. I'm so happy for you. She seems really slutty at first, but then it's the kind of woman you need. His ex-wife said with no irony that he could detect. Yeah, well, it might be a good idea to stop calling her a slut then. I don't think she appreciated it. I guess it was pre-wedding jitters. Look, honey, if she's going to be a part of your life, she's going to be a part of mine. Put her on the phone, will you? I want to apologize. She's in the bathroom right now. Oh, you're not just saying that, are you? Because if she's right there and doesn't want to speak to me, well, I'll have to drive over there and apologize in person. No, don't do that. But she'll be at the race tomorrow. I'm bound to see her. I want everything smoothed out now. You know how I am. I worry. You're going to the race? What was wrong with Harrison that he couldn't grab his wife and get her a pair of them on the honeymoon like a normal couple? Yeah. Sure, you're in town, I'm in town, why wouldn't I go? Because you're on your honeymoon, he reminded her. That's silly. Harrison loves racing. We're all from the same town. We should support each other. Oh, like that was going to happen. Let me talk to her, Dylan. The shower's still running. I should warn you that she's a bit of a clean freak. Once she gets in that shower, I swear, she shampoos her toenails. She'll be a good few minutes yet. Okay, I'll talk to you until she comes out, she sighed. Wasn't that a beautiful wedding? In Dylan's top 10 things he hated discussing, beautiful wedding surely would be in the top 3. Sure, it was. Where's Harrison? Shouldn't you be making babies or something? I sent him off to the jewelry store to get my wedding ring made smaller. Why didn't you go with him? Because I wanted to talk to you and Kendall without him listening in. That's why. He thinks I'm having a facial. You're a spoiled brat, you know that? Of course I know it, and so does Harrison. He'd do anything for me. He's a fool. There was a short pause. You're not going to make me mad enough to hang up on you, so quit trying. Is Kendall out of the shower yet? He grabbed his room card, stuck it in his pocket before slipping out of his hotel room and into the hall. She's singing the Hallelujah chorus, so that means she's shaving her legs. She's almost done. Good. So you did you think the ceremony was too short? I didn't want to make too big of a deal out of it, being it was my 4th wedding and all. 200 guests and enough candles to light up outer space wasn't a big deal. No, he said. I thought it was perfect. From the long experience, he knew he could make noises periodically, and Ashley would just keep talking. Right now, she was going on about twinkle lights. Twinkle lights, And he banged on Kendall's door, hoping she'd still be there. Who is it? He heard a minute later, in a tone that sounded as though she were expecting a firing squad. Honey, he said, loud enough for her to hear through the hotel room door. Ashley is on the phone and wants to talk to you. A beat passed. Honey? The door opened. He blinked. Kendall? He'd barely recognized the woman standing in front of him. She was dressed in a dirt-colored suit with a turtleneck, the color of gold underneath. Her shoes were the flat kind favored by old women with bad knees. I'll put it here for now. Her hair was neat and her posture was stiff. What had happened to last night's wild woman? Even her eyes had changed. Last night they had been sparkling and daring. This morning they were too old for a young woman. Okay, Darian's back.
I just got surprised while I was in the bathroom. So I guess my auntie and little cousin decided to surprise me last second. They just decided to surprise me last second. Just drove out here. My parents are supposed to be here in a couple of days, but I guess since Gabriel's all gone off to summer camp for like a month or two, I guess they wanted to see me. So yeah, I gotta go. I'm sorry, man. This happened like last second. Yeah, last second deal.
Send Danny over here.
Yeah. I'll text him if you can. But
all right.
I'm glad I was able to stay here for how many pages did I stay here for? At least like 20, right? Yeah. Oh, damn, you still got a long way to go. Not even at 30% yet. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I didn't tell them though that hey, I'm streaming tomorrow, so we can only do stuff today. But I guess I'll be in town for a couple of days. But okay. Oh, okay. Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate
no problem.
It. But what chapter do you want right now?
6.
6. All right. Well,
I won't be here all night.
Yeah. Sorry about that. They just surprised me last second. They never do that. They never freaking do that ever. So. But let me say one last thing before I leave. Thank you guys so much for watching. Continue to watch this torture chamber. Tune in tomorrow, noon Central Time, 1 p.m. Eastern Time. NASCAR Thunder 2003 sim through. We're gonna sim through 20 seasons. But yeah, before that, I'll go spend some time with my little cousin for a little bit. So I'm happy they surprised me. I haven't seen them in a while, so it's been a minute.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot better time than what I'm going through.
Yeah. No, if I would rather say Mikey 55,000 times than do this. 100%. 100%. Good luck, man. Good luck the rest of the way.
I'm gonna need it. All right, let's readjust everything here. Later. I don't blame him for leaving. Oh God, here we go. Where were we? Even her eyes changed. Last night they'd been sparkling and daring. This morning they'd looked far too old for a young woman. What is it? He asked, forgetting for a moment why he was there. He felt an impulse to wrap her in his arms. If anyone had ever needed a hug, it was Kendall. She shook her head. There's something I can do for you. Right, the phone. Ashley wants to speak to you. She does. He nodded. He didn't have the heart to tell this model of propriety that Ashley was about to apologize for calling her slutty. Simply handed her the phone. She hesitated and he mouthed, please. Hello? After there was a pretty long silence from Kendall's end, a simple I'm sorry from Ashley was going to take at least 15 minutes since he didn't feel like waiting out in the hallway. He nudged past Kendall and went to sit on the armchair in the corner of the room. She followed him in, the phone still held to her ear. There was an open suitcase on the bed and with a lot of suit-type clothes neatly folded. He never seen so many colors inspired by mud. That's right. Really, I quite understand. No offense taken. Then her gaze flew to his, and she blushed. Ashley must have gotten to the part about them being crazy in love. Kendall crossed to the bed and sat on the edge beside the open suitcase. Oh well, she faltered. He jumped up. She'd better not undo all the good work from last night. Come on, honey, he loudly said so that Ashley could hear. Get off the phone and come back to bed. Oh, I know, she said weakly, shooting him a glare that she hadn't put too much effort into. Yes, insatiable, you too. Goodbye. Kendall hung up and handed back the phone. She looked a little stunned, but at least she had some color back in her face. So, you did a good job last night. She thinks we're totally in love. That's nice. Nice. It's fantastic. You saved me. Thanks. She hung her head. I impersonated somebody else. I went out on a date in my underwear. I gave a speech that no one will ever forget. Don't thank me. He chuckled. That speech was fantastic. I was proud to know you. He shoved the suitcase out of the way, sat beside her on the bed, putting his arm around her shoulder. Forget that bunch of dull suits last night. Your acceptance speech was probably the most fun any of them have ever had. She shuddered against him. Some of those dull suits were my boss's. First thing this morning, I was given a sideways promotion, which is a weasel speak way for saying I was demoted. What? She nodded, looking down. Well, that's just plain stupid. I hope you told them to take their lousy jobs and shove it. She sighed, fiddled with one of the latches on her suitcase, and then said, we live in very different worlds, you and I. Mine is all about risk assessment. Up until yesterday, I was an asset to my company. Today, I'm a liability. I'm risky. If I could embarrass my bosses at an organization function, then maybe I'd do the same at a board meeting. My company is very conservative. They've taken steps to minimize damage. They say I'm being moved for my own good, and they probably mean it. They're messing with one of their best people, or they give that pencil to anybody. No, you're right. It's a very prestigious award. She looked at him and was a crease between her brows. So why didn't I simply tell you who I was when we first met last night, get my dress, and then go to the banquet and give the speech as scheduled? The question seemed like a no-brainer to him because you wanted to have some fun, and there's no way fun was going to be had at a corporate dinner. I about went into a coma from entering the room. It wasn't until you got going that the place livened up. Let's see. She put a hand to her head. She had dainty hands, he noticed, with long fingers. Her nails were longer than he would have expected, too, painted pink. Maybe they're right, and I showed you poor judgment. Maybe your ex should keep it zipped. She glanced up and laughed, giving him a glimpse of the woman that he had met and had fun with last night. Then she sobered. The two women involved were reassigned, and Marvin gets to keep his job. The old double standard is alive and well in corporate America. He didn't even know how to respond to that, but he felt vaguely guilty for simply being a man. Wow. What are you going to do? Take the job. At least I'll have security of a paycheck while I think about my options. You don't sound real thrilled about the idea. I'm not. Do you need the job that badly? A tiny smile tilted her lips, but not a hint of teeth showing. I'm an actuary. I calculate risk for a living. The first thing I did after I paid off my student loans was build an emergency fund equal to 6 months' salary. But it's easier to find a job when you already have one. You started a job by figuring out what the odds were on losing it? She nodded. He scratched his jaw. She was still pale, but a little color was coming back into her cheek. Why don't you tell them to shove it and take a few weeks vacation? Which, if you don't mind me asking, you look like you could, or saying, you look like you could use, and then find another job. In your world, maybe that's pretty simple, but not in mine. Babe, when you screw up in my business, you end up turning cartwheels strapped inside a tin can going 180 miles an hour. She stuttered. So do something else. You're too much fun for that room full of corpses last night. She shook her head, then put a hand to her forehead as though she had forgotten she had a headache. You're wrong. I'm exactly like those corpses. You've unfortunately got the wrong impression of me, and my behavior from last night. Perfectly understandable. We make decisions about a person based on first impressions. I showed up in your room half dressed. I thought you looked great. Those long fingers with pink nails touched her turtleneck as though checking it still covered up if it still covered up her chin. Unfortunately, it did. Thank you. The point is, our meeting was all in error, and then I compounded that error by pretending to be someone I wasn't, for which I owe you an apology. This woman was way too hard on herself. Bryce left a message. The woman who was supposed to be my date last night had an appendicitis attack. Honey, you saved my ass. Well, that's good. Why don't you take some time off? Sticking around here for a few days. Watch the race tomorrow. You'll be doing me the biggest favor of my life. You hang on my arm and tell Ashley more about how you love me and how incredible I am. She managed a small eye roll, which made him grin. She's married now. What difference does it make? Ha, Ashley treats marriage as a temporary inconvenience. All she has to do is get it back into her head that the astrologer meant she was supposed to be with me. And she'll do something like embarrass me on national television. Really? Kendall shook her head. I'd like to help you, but I can't. I've got to get back to Portland. Hey, I'll tell you what. Tell them you need a couple of weeks off, and it will give them time to organize your move. Stick around till Thursday when Ash leaves on her honeymoon, and then I'll fly you home. She blinked as though he'd suggested she detour to the moon. You'll fly me home? Well, not me personally, but my plane. What kind of plane? A small Lear? I'm being offered a ride on a Learjet? I don't believe it. He grinned at her. It would be another first for that list of yours. And if you wear one of those slips tomorrow, you'll get on TV for sure. That earned him a genuine laugh. As tempted as I am, I can't. Before he could argue, there was a knock on the door. Now what? She muttered to herself, exasperated. End of chapter 6. Oh my God. Oh, Jesus Christ. I'm gonna do a super chat real quick. Wait a minute. Damn, we've been live for a while. All right. Looking at super chats now. Snappy452 for 2 said, I'd pay good money to hear Ward Burton read this. And FredDog81 for 5 says, imagine if the Hallmark Channel has enough nerve to make this into a movie. Wow. And then some of you are guessing Norm Benning walks in the door, or what is the FAA designated call sign of this plane? Nick Sanchez gets sideways. Final corner at Daytona. Who will win the race? Smith 7. Keselowski 22. Oh my God. Whiskey, sir. Whiskey. Trust me, I'm way ahead of you. This is caramel whiskey. It tastes good. All right. Chapter 7. We're only a third of the way through, Jesus. Kendall's words were still echoing in her ears when she opened the door and got a big dose of exactly what she didn't want right now. Aggravation. Standing outside her door, looking self-righteous and condemning, was Marvin. Before she'd worked out how to handle it, her instinct was to slam the door in his face. Marvin was inside her hotel room, though. He'd begun talking as soon as she'd glimpsed his face. "I hope you're pleased with yourself," he said, his usually placid tones jerky and annoying. What in? He stopped short as he caught sight of Dylan, who seemed to be like a dynamic comic book hero with his tall, dark, good looks and his imposing body. Next to him, Marvin seemed like exactly what he was, a nondescript, desk-bound middle manager with a nice blonde hair and not another interesting thing in his appearance. Her head started to pound. She glanced at her watch. She still had 15 minutes until it was safe to take another dose of painkiller. "I don't know. I don't think we've met," said Dylan, holding out his hand as though Marvin might have been a fan in search of an autograph. "I'm Dylan Hargrove." Marvin, as caught in the restraints of polite behavior as she, shook his hand and as briefly as possible, but spoke to Kendall. "Why is he in your hotel room?" She opened her mouth to explain. Dylan, "Well, there's a stupid question if I've ever heard one." His drawl was so good, old boy, it almost took him half an hour to spit out those words. The look he sent her as soon as he said it almost made her bones melt. Marvin stared from one to the other. "Did you sleep with him?" The words seemed to echo around the room. Dylan didn't say a word, but glanced her way with a tiny, self-satisfied grin. "That's none of your business," she snapped. Then she stalked to the bathroom, leaving the door open. She took one of the hotel glasses, ran water from the tap, and took 2 pain pills and swallowed them 14.5 minutes before the instructions printed on the back of the bottle said it was safe to do so. At the moment, a little bit of poisoning seemed like a small price to pay for the relief from the pounding headache in her skull. "I would never have believed it," Marvin said in outrage. He was doing such a great job of the innocent act that she was certain he'd end up promoted after he managed to dump her personally and screw her professionally in the space of a day. "Well," she said, coming back into the room, "I would never have believed you'd start a relationship with one of our colleagues right under my nose. What do you want anyway? I feel it's my responsibility to the firm to ensure that you'd get home safely and in full view of everyone who was anyone in the industry." How had she never noticed the toad he was? "Well, aren't you a Boy Scout?" Dylan said, sounding like his mouth was full of grit. He piled a couple of pillows up against the wood headboard and plonked himself down on her bed as though he were planning to stay a while. "Marvin, I'm fine, thank you. I'll see you downstairs." "I wouldn't feel right leaving until he does," Marvin said, gesturing with a jerk of his head to Dylan. "Thing is, I'm trying to proposition Kendall, and it's tough in your audience." "Oh, stop it," she snapped beyond exasperation. "You're not." "I am," he said, suddenly rising to his feet and stepping close. "Take a holiday. You sure look like you could use one. You can see a couple of races. We'll have a few laughs. Go home when you feel like it." "But I've got responsibilities." She became aware that hers was not the only voice speaking. Marvin talked over her. "Your obligations at home. You've got to stop acting irrational." When she talked about her responsibilities, she felt mature and needed. Why, when Marvin mentioned the same thing, did she sound like an old maid? "I'll be fine," she said firmly, then walked over to the door and held open until her ex-fiancé left, muttering under his breath. She turned to say goodbye to Dylan, and it was harder than she'd imagined to walk away from the only man in her life that had mistaken her for an exciting woman. "Dylan, if you're ever in Portland?" For a wild second, she contemplated giving him her business card, but Portland was nowhere near NASCAR tracks. Little did we know. Which was only one indication of how far outside Dylan's world she'd lived. "I enjoyed meeting you," she said. "I had a great time last night," he said. Their night out might have resulted in disaster, but she couldn't help the spurt of pleasure when she recalled their evening. I had a great time too, she admitted, hoping she didn't sound too wistful. Bye, Kendall, she said, and pulled her to him, kissed her, and he did something that made her shoulders and head tilt back, and suddenly she was being kissed like she'd never been kissed before. A tiny sound came from her throat, kind of, oh, I never knew it could be like this kind of moan. And her arms went around his neck. Suddenly, she wanted the clock to flip back to last night. She wanted to be in that foolish slip of silk, masquerading as the kind of woman a man like Dylan would parade around. She'd have gone on kissing him for days, but Dylan had finally pulled away. He looked a little dazed. She couldn't imagine how dazed she must appear. Here's my card, she said, digging out of his pocket. If you change your mind. Thank you, she said. He left, and after she'd carefully placed the card inside her wallet, she'd fixed her lipstick and wheeled her suitcase out of the room toward the elevator, forcing herself not to look at Dylan's door when she passed. She passed a housekeeper a couple doors down from Dylan's room with a cart of cleaning products and a bag of little soaps and shampoos. The woman nodded at Kendall and then pushed her dark hair behind her ears. There was a newspaper sticking out of a full trash bag and a headline about a presidential speech. Two things immediately struck to Kendall as odd. One, she hadn't read in this morning's paper with all the drama that had been there, and two, she didn't seem to care. In the paper, there was probably a whole lot talking about tomorrow's race. She wondered if Dylan had mentioned and if her date would soon fade into one of those amazing celebrity encounter stories that didn't seem quite real. Thankfully, she was alone on the elevator. She made her way swiftly through the lobby, having used the express checkout and left her keys in her room. When she got outside, she noted the air was warm, the sky was sunny. There was a lineup of people standing in front of the hotel, each with a black bag or two. As her eyes focused, she realized that she knew most of them. They all were members of her association, people she'd hoped to avoid this morning. Now she remembered the chartered bus that had been booked to take them to take the departing away to the airport. She greeted a few people as she walked to the end of the line, the wheels of her case bumping across the pavement, conversations going her way from some of the people standing in line, bits and pieces of chit-chat, which stopped suddenly. She turned slowly and saw Marvin and Penelope. The two were holding hands, but looked as though they'd only recently stopped. They weren't holding hands, but looked like they recently stopped. They took a few steps forward, saw Kendall at the end of the line, hesitated in perfect synchronization. She glanced at Marvin as though she realized that he couldn't stand there much longer without looking like an idiot. He started forward once more. The two of them took their place in line behind Kendall. Humiliation burned in her stomach. I'll be honest, guys, this is kind of boring now. Like, it went from the funny part to the boring part. Kendall, Marvin said softly behind her. He sounded tentative and kinder than he had earlier. The thought flickered through her mind that he was going to apologize. She had no idea how she'd respond, but an apology would be nice. Some admission to his behavior had been reprehensible. She would go a long way to soothing her lacerated feelings. Yes, she mumbled, turning a face to him. She knew that every eye was on them and could feel and that she could one day forgive Marvin if he tried to smooth things over with her for today. On this most difficult of days, a low roar that sounded familiar came in behind her. Where cars were parked, Marvin had to raise his voice. He heard, I was wondering if you would mind changing seats with Penelope so she and I could sit together. Unbelievable. Dylan's car appeared, a shiny red blur in her peripheral. A line of dark-suited men and women stretched like black ropes that bound her to her past. Dylan's sports car was the future, a rocket ship to adventure. It was her getaway car, and they wanted to gossip about her. She'd given them something to talk about. Hey, Dylan, she shouted, stepping forward and with her hand. I just got a text from Darian. Hold on 1 second. I'm seeing some problems on my end with the stream. Okay. Hey, Dylan, she shouted, stepping forward with her hand outstretched as though she were hailing a cab. He slowed and pulled close to where she stood. As the offer still opened, he grinned at her, the dare in his eyes. Hop in. Kendall, I strongly advise you to think about your behavior, Marvin was saying behind her, while all of those curious, gossip-hungry eyes looking on. In seconds, Dylan had stowed her luggage into the tiniest trunk she'd ever seen, then jumped back behind the window of the rumbling car. They were pulling away when she heard Marvin shout, "Are you crazy?" "Oh, yes," she cried, turning, send him a goodbye wave, "and that's why I'm on stress leave. Crazy has never felt so good." End of the chapter. All right, let's see. I want to see what you guys are saying in the chat, because this is what happened to Darian. Darian had to leave. His family's in town, and trust me, I would not want to keep him here. The book peaked at Carl Edwards. I agree. You're bored. I get it. Let's see. Let's see what else we got. That was both cool and saddening at the same time. Oh, wait, we're talking about there's actually a conversation going here. Hi, Mr. Berg. Hey, JC. How's it going, buddy? Someone could write a book that starts out as a romance novel but quickly becomes an 80s action movie book in book form. I like that. It'd be better than this. This boring love stuff. We need 28 wide racing at Talladega. Either Chastain or a White Sox fan is to blame for this. Let's see. Well, the jock took the nerd. I'm just stopping by. Lots of racing still this weekend. Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, it went from like fun to boring pretty quick. And I'll be honest, I'm having like I think I'm actually having internet problems on this end. It's not showing up on stream, but there is stuff on the OBS that's going haywire. Where's my 8 wide racing? Let's see. By the way, thank you guys so much for this point for watching. Trust me, at this point, I wouldn't want to be watching. Euro NASCAR this morning, ARCA tonight, Euro NASCAR tomorrow morning, F1 and IndyCar tomorrow. Yeah. Honestly, though, it's went from entertaining to honestly really boring. Yeah, there might be an internet red flag. I don't know. I've been having actually a little power stuff here and there, so I don't know whether or not it'll stay up. But we'll try. Let's see. I'm trying to fix everything here. While you're at it, leave stuff in the chat, and I can answer questions while I try and fix it. There's no, red flag immediately. Is there anything? So if you're saying it's going good on your end, I'm just making sure. I figure what we could do is we'll just like go until the stream stops working, and if it just suddenly cuts, it suddenly cuts. I don't want to make it a a hassle. If it goes off, then it goes off. But if not, we'll keep going. What's the name of this book? Speed Dating. Yeah, now it's so what we'll do is we'll keep pushing on, and if stuff glitches out or the stream just stops, then you know what, we gave it a shot. So we'll push on for now. But if it does cut out, I'm not going to try and push it all night. I want to make sure that, you know, everything's good for streams that we do normally. Oh boy. Where were we? Okay, chapter 8. How do you feel? Dylan glanced in her direction. The smile that made her stomach wobble. Shocked, she craned her head over her shoulder, saw the bus from the airport arrive, the bus that she ought to be on. For a second, she contemplated begging Dylan to drive her to the airport when then she stopped herself. No, maybe jumping into Dylan's car was a little wacky, but she'd made her decision. She could slink home with her tail between her legs and spend her stress leave miserable, or she could do something wild, crazy, and completely exciting. Right or wrong, she was giving a wild and crazy a try for once. Stage 8. I hope I have something appropriate to wear to a car race, she said. I've never been to one before. Honestly, if you want one man's opinion, your underwear is a lot nicer than the clothes I saw in those suitcases. They're all the color of dirt. Earth tones, she corrected. I once had my colors done. I'm a fall. We're supposed to wear colors of autumn, greens and browns and rust, she explained. His glance suggested he hadn't been reminded of colorful autumn foliage when he'd look inside of her suitcase. The trouble was, she was never quite sure when a color was verifiably fall. Going to the next. A mile or so passed, and she saw they were on the highway. She had no idea where they were bound. I think I should explain I'm not normally an impulsive person. He glanced over at her, the speed they were going. She was really wishing that he wouldn't. He should keep both eyes on the road and both hands on the steering wheel. I think you have hidden depths. Last night you were definitely impulsive. Yes, I suppose I was. A flicker of pride glowing inside her. I'm not sure why I did that. It's so out of character. That made me think twice. In 2 days, she'd done something completely unlike herself. Why did you let that little pissant treat you that way? Arvin, she thought about Dylan's question. In fact, I'm not very good at standing up for myself, she sighed. In fact, I'm terrible at it. She nibbled her chin and looked out the window, thinking about how often she'd berated herself for the problem and yet had been unable to act any different than the next time when asked to do something that wasn't her job, or had someone break in while she was talking, refuse her ideas. Maybe all you need is some practice. I signed up for assertiveness training last winter, but it didn't help. Dylan glanced over, a disturbing twinkle lurking in his eye. What happened? Did you fail? Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. Whopper. She bit her lip some more, wishing she hadn't been drawn into the subject in the first place. I didn't go. The twinkle in his eyes deepened. He wasn't stupid. You were unavoidably called out of town. No, sick with the flu. And wow, it gave. Hold on a second. I know it's not messing up on y'all's end, but it's messing up on my end. And I'm just making sure. All right. Let's see. I'm just making sure it's working, because on my end there's stuff on OBS that's messing up. Did someone say about this book you need to try first? Let's see. I'm just making because my OBS is messing up a little bit. I've had this problem lately where it freezes. So the stream will be fine, but I can't see anything that's working right now. All right. I know you guys. Okay, you guys are good. I just know on my end it's messing up really bad, and it's giving me problems going back and forth. So, let's see. Yeah. I'm not kidding. Keep your fingers crossed. I mean, again, I can see you guys in the chat. It's like the OBS stuff though. It's frozen on OBS, so I don't know what's going on my end. Let's see. It's saying everything's fine. It's the I don't know what exactly it is, because like everything setting wise should be fine. Well, if it just randomly, yeah, I updated it. Hey Darian, I can see, because I can see the stream working on my phone. Hey Darian, you might have left at just the right time, because the OBS is remember. Okay, Darian will know this. The OBS has been messing up lately, and it messed up before actually the podcast we were late for. I think a week or two ago it messed up for. Darian will know what I'm talking about. But Darren, let me know if you know what I'm talking about with like the whole freezing and stuff and all that. But no, I mean I updated it this morning. It should be fine. I don't know what's going on here though. I'd rather it mess up on this though than like the podcast or a post race stream. So it's pretty good. It happened in the off weekend. Yeah, Darian knows exactly what I'm talking about. Let's see. Let me see. Maybe. All right. And MVR owner, I see you're upset, but there's still 3 hours worth of it at this point. We're actually, even though it says we're X% through, it's much closer to halfway. Oh, shoot. I'm going to hate if this thing goes off. Let's see. All right, I think one thing I'm going to try is maybe if I